Chapter 1128. Rui Butong's sharp teeth sank into the man's calf. His eyes rolled anxiously, looking in Chu Yang's direction. HP. Friend uploaded update. The expression in his eyes was very obvious. Boss. Go quickly. The sharp teeth sank into his body and blood splattered. The man in black couldn't help but groan and curse. Damn it. He exerted strength in his left leg and kicked out. With a bang, Rui Butong spat out blood crazily. Both his arms were broken, and all the bones in his body were shattered inch by inch. He flew up hundreds of feet into the sky before he began to fall. In the end, the black-clothed man was stopped by Chu Yang for a moment. His body fell down, and at the same time, his eyes burned with anger. It seemed that he had been provoked. His eyes looked around looking for Chu Yang. Chu Yang, the one I want to kill is you. Don't let your good brothers die for you. How can you bear to do that? Yes, what he said was not wrong at all. Seeing his brothers shed blood for him, Chu Yang's heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. Just as the man in black said, the one he wanted to kill was only him. Leave quickly. Let him away. Regardless of life or death, his brothers would be safe. Although the man in black said this to provoke him, it also spoke to Chu Yang's heart. Chu Yang let out a loud roar. Then, he rode his sword and flew out at lightning speed. Two fierce palms slapped toward Chu Yang. A black shadow flashed and appeared behind Chu Yang. The man in black's eyes revealed a cruel expression. He looked at Chu Yang's back like a vulture and raised his palms. At the edge of his palms, as he raised them, a cloud of black gas appeared. It was as if two empty black holes were suddenly brought out in the air. Immediately, he slapped out like lightning. With these two palms, the wind howled, and two clear traces of collapsed black holes actually appeared in the air. In the sky full of snow, it seemed to be a path to hell. The man in black attacked with all his strength. He wanted to kill Chu Yang in one blow. There was a sound. It was Dong Wuxiang, who threw out half of the black saber with all his strength. This saber had never left his hand since it was successfully made. He had always treasured it like his life. Even when it was damaged several times before, he had never cherished it less. But this time, it was the first time the black saber had left his hand. After throwing out this saber, Dong Wuxiang spat out blood and fell to the ground. Previously, he was the one who charged the most ferociously. He was the biggest threat to the men in black, and he was also the most injured. After throwing the saber, he fainted. The black saber slashed horizontally at the black-robed man's wrist. The black-robed man snorted. He withdrew his palm that had been aimed at Chu Yang. Then he chopped his palm horizontally on the black saber. Half of the black saber broke into two pieces with a clang sound. Life and death in an instant. Mo Qingwu clenched her silver teeth. Disregarding her own life, she activated Bu Liuqing's proudest movement technique. It was also the fastest movement technique. She turned the power of life and death into speed, and rushed forward with all her might. At this moment Mo Qingwu, it had completely transformed into a stream of light. Qingwu Dream Saber was pushed to the limit, and it was actually at the edge of the saber. It reflected a circle of rainbows, just like Mo Qingwu's life. It was burning rapidly. The speed at the moment of life and death had actually completely made up for the difference in speed between him and a supreme martial artist. Taking advantage of the moment when the black-robed man's body was shaken after receiving Dong Wuxiang's dark saber, he madly rushed over. He slashed at the black-clothed man. The supreme saber. Ning Tianya's secret. The black-clothed man flipped his palm and hit the saber. The saber trembled, and Mo Qingwu spat out a mouthful of blood. But the saber didn't stop. It shook and fell. The black-clothed man frowned. He slapped his palm on the blade of Mo Qingwu's saber again. It was obvious that he hadn't used all his strength to deal with Mo Qingwu or Chu Luer. He was still wary of Ning Tianya and Zi Xiecheng. With a wah, Mo Qingwu only managed to call out, "Chu!" before she fainted in midair. Her body flew backward. At this moment, Chu Yang was already 70 feet away. The black-clothed man snorted. "You think you can leave?" He rose. With a stride in midair, he was right in front of Chu Yang. He slapped his palm down wildly. The Sword Spirit's Tribulation sword came out. The other party slapped his palm down. Deflected. The Sword Spirit's palms flew out. The black-clothed man snorted and his palms met. The two palms met. With a bang, Chu Yang, who was in the sword spirit's palms, fell backward. Both his wrists were broken. He only felt a burning pain in his chest. His vision was actually a little blurry. Just one blow, and he had already suffered serious internal injuries. The other party didn't retreat at all. Like a shadow, he chased closely. His eyes flashed with killing intent and admiration. His two hands were like huge axes that could split mountains, slamming down toward Chu Yang's chest. Chu Yang, who was possessed by the sword spirit, couldn't help but sigh. The enemy's strength was unparalleled. At this moment, he was really at the end of his rope. Right at this moment, Wu Qianqian let out a loud cry. At this moment, she actually dashed over at a ghostly speed with a strength that no one knew where she got it from. The speed that Wu Qianqian displayed at this moment was definitely not something that a human could possess. Even if it was her potential, it definitely wouldn't be so exaggerated. But Wu Qianqian did it. Exquisite library. Baidu search. In her eyes, there was only Chu Yang's crisis. She couldn't think of anything else. At this moment, she actually displayed such an incredible speed that shouldn't have appeared in the heavens. With just a swoosh, she was right in front of Chu Yang. With her own chest, she met the black-clothed man's palms. Wu Qianqian's eyes were very calm. In the lower three heavens, I once wanted to die for you, but you didn't allow it. But you stopped me. Today let me die for you. Even if you want to die, please let me block it for you first. No, Chu Yang shouted loudly. The black-clothed man's palms had already landed solidly on Wu Qianqian's chest. He realized that something was wrong. The person in front of him had actually changed. It was a beautiful girl in the prime of her youth. At this moment, with a resolute attitude, with an unusual calmness in her eyes, she used her delicate chest to meet his palms that could split mountains and split rocks. He actually retracted the power of his palm. He remembered that this was the disciple of Yu Lingxue and Feng Yuro. Feng Yuro's death hadn't been confirmed yet. It was a little too early to kill their disciple now. But at the same time, a trance flashed across his heart, as if he was recalling 10,000 years ago. At that time of life and death crisis, his beloved wife, with determination, also used her body to meet the enemy's sword, recalling that time. That splendid flower of blood that bloomed amidst the green mountains and clear waters. So he retracted his palms. But after all, that overwhelming palms had already landed solidly on Wu Qianqian's chest. There was a cracking sound. Wu Qianqian's chest suddenly sank inwards. But at this moment, she actually didn't retreat. Instead, she maintained her momentum and actually continued to close in on the black-clothed man. Her hands pushed back violently on Chu Yang's body. She pushed Chu Yang's body, which was already retreating, even faster. The black-clothed man looked at the determined and calm eyes of the young girl in front of him. He let out a long sigh in his heart. His body rose into the air, 100 feet high, avoiding Wu Qianqian's pounce. Wu Qianqian's body. Then he pounced over from under his feet. Blood gurgled out of her mouth. She wanted to forcibly control herself to turn back, to see if her sacrifice could exchange for the escape of her lover. But she couldn't turn back. Her consciousness was already a little blurry. The black-clothed man's palms. Although he had retracted most of his palms, but he was still a genuine supreme martial artist. Both palms landed on Wu Qianqian. Although he had retracted most of his palms, it wasn't something that Wu Qianqian, who was now a 5th-grade martial saint, could withstand. Wu Qianqian's internal organs. They were all shattered. The bones in her chest and back were completely shattered. Her dantian and meridians. They had all exploded to the extent that they couldn't be repaired. It was a fatal injury. The black-clothed man rose into the air and was about to turn around and chase after Chu Yang. But suddenly his eyes narrowed. Then with a swoosh, he rose into the air and turned around in midair. His figure disappeared into the vast snowstorm. He actually left just like that. Outside the Orchard Palace, at the faraway intersection, 2 white figures were sitting on a snow sleigh, braving the snow and coming over. Both of them were dressed in snow-white clothes. Sitting on the snow sleigh, their faces were rosy, and they seemed to be chatting and laughing with each other. But because they were too far away, they couldn't see clearly. But these 2 people's expressions were very leisurely, very leisurely. On the snow sleigh behind them, there was a black-clothed man lying on it. It seemed to be their spoils of war. The black-clothed man in the air saw that this man and woman were rushing over, so he made a prompt decision to retreat immediately. Otherwise, when this man and woman discovered what was happening here, even though they were so far away, he definitely wouldn't be able to escape. So the black-clothed man made a prompt decision to not chase after Chu Yang and escape immediately. Because these two people were Feng Yuro and Yu Lingxue. The Moon Breeze couple appeared here and looked fine. That meant that the slaying of the Tao battle had already failed. Chu Yang could kill them in the future, but if he lost his life here, it would be over. The black-clothed man disappeared with a swoosh. At this moment, Mo Qingwu's body landed, and just happened to bump into Meng Chaoran, who was flying over. Meng Chaoran threw his sword and caught Mo Qingwu. Both of them rolled on the ground at the same time. Wu Qianqian's body fell weakly like a kite with a broken string. Mo desperately flew up to catch her. With a crack, the strong impact broke both of Mo Layer's arms. Both of them fell to the ground at the same time. Wu Qianqian's body rolled out of Mo Layer's arms. She rolled twice on the snowy ground and stopped moving. Her hair was messy and covered her face. Qianqian. Qingwu. Chu Yang landed on the ground with a thud. Then he jumped up like a madman. Qingwu is fine. Take a look at Qianqian first. Meng Chaoran shouted anxiously. Chu Yang roared. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. Both of his arms were still broken. He rushed over like a madman. At this moment, both of his eyes were red. Chu Yang rushed to Wu Qianqian's side and reached out to help her up. The moment he touched her, a piercing pain came from his broken wrist. Chu Yang frowned and gritted his teeth. He helped Wu Qianqian up just like that. He let her lean against his chest. Using his broken arm to support himself, he took out 2 incomplete versions of heavy pills and stuffed them into Wu Qianqian's mouth. Then he took one himself. He anxiously watched Wu Qianqian's reaction. With a weak moan, Wu Qianqian forced herself to open her eyes. When she saw Chu Yang, her eyes were filled with joy and relief. The heavy pill preserved her vital energy that had yet to dissipate, but it could not restore her broken internal organs. First update. Begging for votes. Chapter 1129. Qianqian. Senior Sister Qianqian. Chu Yang called out anxiously. Looking at Wu Qianqian's pale face and checking her injuries, Chu Yang felt as if his heart had fallen into a bottomless abyss. Wu Qianqian's injuries were fatal. As far as Chu Yang knew, there was no way to save Wu Qianqian's life. This made Chu Yang's heart feel as if it was being torn apart. For a moment, he felt as if his life had lost its color. You're okay, that's great. Wu Qianqian looked at Chu Yang weakly. Her voice was weak, but she was extremely relieved. I'm okay, you'll be okay too. Chu Yang felt as if a knife was being twisted in his heart. He hugged Wu Qianqian's body. For a moment, he felt as if his heart was being torn apart, healed, and torn apart again. Even now she's still relieved that I'm okay? Don't comfort me. Wu Qianqian's voice was weak, low and weak, but it was filled with infinite affection. I can't do it. I can feel my mother waiting for me here. Chu Yang, I'm going. Wu Qianqian said weakly. Her eyes were shining with love. Chu Yang thought of Wu Qianqian's dream and suddenly burst into tears. She had dreamed of her mother a few days ago, saying that her mother had come to pick her up. This dream was ominous. Chu Yang had long felt it, but he didn't expect that it would coincide with the dream in such a way. He hugged Wu Qianqian tightly in his arms with his broken arm. For a moment he was choked with sobs and couldn't speak. He had let her down a lot. From the lower 3 heavens, every step he took, Wu Qianqian's shadow was behind him. She did her best to help him. She used all her intelligence and wisdom to force herself to learn those things. She shouldn't have let a weak girl carry out any mission, any knowledge. When she first arrived at Iron Cloud, she would turn pale at the sight of blood. She would tremble at the sight of corpses. But in order to help him, he didn't know how she forced herself to accept all those cruel things. Every order, it was all done by her. Every time she dealt with the aftermath, she had to do it herself. Every time. When he left the lower 3 heavens, her heart was broken, but she was still strong. She put on his black robe, wore his mask, and shouldered his responsibilities. Now that she had come to the upper three heavens, she still wanted to accompany him, going through fire and water, fighting a bloody battle. But I didn't give her anything. She even longed for a promise. Nothing at all. Even now, she was still doing it for him. She had used her delicate body to block the fatal blow for him. For himself. She paid with her life. In the lower three heavens, when the Golden Horse Riders Department tried to assassinate him, she wanted to take his place. Later on, when he fought against the Golden Horse Riders Department, she still wanted to die for him. Until today, she had still ended her life in the way she had longed for. Even though she was so reluctant to do so. She loved him deeply, he knew it, but she never said it out loud. Love you, but this has nothing to do with you. Wu Qianqian curled up in Chu Yang's embrace. She felt the warmth of Chu Yang's embrace. The corners of her mouth curled up in satisfaction. She said softly, so warm. It's so warm, I can't bear to leave. This is the first time in my life that I'm in his arms. Big drops of Chu Yang's tears fell on her face. I'm going. My mother is waiting for me. I'm very happy. You don't have to worry about me. Wu Qianqian lowered her head. She looked at Chu Yang's black robe with nostalgia. In the corner of the black robe, there were a few words that she had embroidered with her own beautiful hair. Chu Yang, Qianqian likes you. She suddenly felt sour. In fact, I really can't bear to leave him. Chu Yang, after I leave, don't wear black robe anymore. Wu Qianqian said weakly. You will think of me if you wear black robe. You will feel sad when you think of me. Chu Yang didn't know what to say. He hugged her tightly and said with a choked voice, don't go, you won't go. In fact, I'm very happy. If I die like this, really. This is what I wanted because... Wu Qianqian's mouth revealed a trace of a difficult smile. She tried hard to raise her eyes and said with some hope, Chu Yang, you said at that time, you owed someone a lifetime. So you wanted to repay it. If I die today, will you owe me? Will you repay me in your next life? I will, Chu Yang said firmly. He nodded fiercely. As he nodded, tears fell down. I will definitely repay you. I will repay you in this life. Senior Sister Qian, don't die. I'm really looking forward to the next life. I will wait for you to repay me with a lifetime. Wu Qianqian was lost in thought. Snowflakes fell on her face. Her eyes revealed deep love. She whispered to herself, Chu Yang, Qianqian likes you. Chu Yang, Qianqian likes you. This woman who was supposed to be weak, but was now strong and independent, had always hidden these words in her heart. She had always sewed these words deeply, quietly and humbly in her robe. She had never said them out loud. Not even once. But at the moment when her life was about to disappear, she bravely said these words. She knew that if she didn't say them out loud, she wouldn't have another chance. Because Chu Yang had already promised her another life. So, she was afraid that she would break the promise. So before she died, she had to say them out loud. She reminded herself of life and death. Chu Yang would definitely not break the promise. But she was afraid that she would break the promise and miss it. Chu Yang, Qianqian likes you. I like you too. It's true. Chu Yang opened his mouth and gasped for air. But he still felt that his chest and throat were blocked. The intense grief almost suffocated him. At the moment when she was about to leave, Chu Yang suddenly remembered that in his previous life, Mo Qing Wu was at the side of the purple bamboo forest. She was in his arms and she passed away. Why did the feeling at that time and the feeling now feel so similar? Why? He could only watch her leave, and he couldn't do anything about it. Heavy pill. It could heal serious injuries. But this kind of destruction of life and soul. Heavy pill. He still couldn't do anything about it. So what if I became the real Earth Calamity Sword Master? So what if I stood at the peak? So what if I rushed to the Heavenly Imperial Court in the future? But she still died today. Chu Yang's heart was roaring, wailing. Wu Qianqian quietly looked at the hem of Chu Yang's black robe. She could no longer lift her head. She felt weak all over. She felt that her soul was about to leave her body and fly away. But she didn't want to leave. She tried her best to stay a little longer. She couldn't bear to leave because she was in this warm embrace. In this life, this was the first time she was in his embrace. It was so warm, so comfortable, so safe. But this was the first time. This was the last time. How could she bear to leave? How could she bear to leave? Even if she could stay a little longer, it would be good and she would be happy. But she knew that she would leave eventually. This embrace, this life. It didn't belong to her. Wu Qianqian smiled miserably. Her eyes. It was as if he could already see his mother holding his hand, slowly walking away. And Chu Yang just stood there watching her leave. She turned back time and time again. But she was eventually pulled away by her mother. She used all her strength, and with a tone that was close to praying, she said, Chu Yang, you must be happy in this life. Then, she felt her own fatigue, the fatigue of her soul. She had to leave. She really had to leave. She couldn't bear to at this moment. She suddenly remembered something very important. She suddenly panted heavily and tried hard to open her eyes. She actually opened them miraculously, but her eyes were already lifeless. Chu Yang was so close to her, but she couldn't even see Chu Yang's black robe. She only tried her best to say the important thing in her heart. There's something important, Chu Yang. Chu Yang, go to the lower three heavens and find Tai Butian. She's a girl. You. Wu Qianqian's lips moved slightly as she said weakly. But every sentence and every word she said now was like a violent thunder in Chu Yang's heart, striking fiercely at his heart. At this moment, Chu Yang was actually at a loss. Tai Butian was a girl. Wu Qianqian murmured in a weak voice. She struggled with all her might and said, You. That time you were poisoned. She was the one who saved you. Chu Yang. Her nickname is Little Tian Tian. Tian Tian. Chu Yang. She is pregnant with your child. Wu Qianqian struggled and finally said her last words. Don't let her down. I'm so envious. My feelings for you haven't changed. Her body trembled, and suddenly there was no movement. Her last words before she died had expressed the obsession and resentment in her heart. Don't let her down. I'm so envious of her. My feelings for you haven't changed. Didn't you think that I was once the empress? But the empress is a woman. And also your woman. I haven't changed really. Chu Yang's heart felt as if it was hit by a big hammer. For a moment, he felt as if he was in a dream. Everything was so dreamy and illusory. As if he was the only one left in the vast world. She was the one who saved you that time. She was little Tian Tian. She was pregnant with your child. Wu Qianqian's delicate body trembled, and she didn't make a sound. Her eyes were still looking at him. This woman who was originally weak, but later became strong because of him. At this moment, her eyes regained their softness and pitifulness. But that gaze of his was so empty and lifeless, Chu Yang only felt his mind blur. He looked at everything in front of him, only a vast expanse of whiteness. At this moment agitation, guilt, regret and grief were intertwined. For a moment his body shook violently. His legs couldn't support him, and he knelt on the ground with a thud. He hugged Wu Qianqian's body and roared towards the sky, tears rolling down his face. Chapter 1131. Chu Yang seemed to have understood something and started to ponder. Sword Spirit, are you trying to say that the word cherish is the most precious thing in this world? Chu Yang said word by word. I didn't say that. You said it yourself. The Sword Spirit smiled slyly. Chu Yang also smiled as if he had understood something. He muttered the word cherish, and felt the pressure in his heart lessen a lot. He also seemed to have a deeper understanding in his heart. He murmured, Thank you, Sword Spirit. I think I understand now. I will cherish what I already have even more in the future. The Sword Spirit smiled faintly and said in a low voice, Yes, in life. It is a great happiness to have something worth cherishing. You are very happy because there are many things worth cherishing, and those worth cherishing. The Sword Spirit's voice sounded a little disappointed. Chu Yang said quietly, Sword Spirit, you are also worth cherishing. He paused for a moment and said, I cherish you very much. The Sword Spirit's body trembled and he laughed. Thank you. His voice sounded a little unnatural. Chu Yang smiled comfortingly, and looked at Wu Qianqian's body in his arms with heartache. He asked, In that case, how do I preserve Qianqian's body? The Sword Spirit reminded him, You can put her into the tribulation space. Although the tribulation space can't accommodate living things at your current level, she is now a dead person. The tribulation space doesn't matter to a dead body. When Chu Yang heard this, he immediately flew into a rage. Dead person? Dead body. You are the damn dead body. Your whole family are dead bodies. This guy had just thanked him. He had just said that he cherished him. And now he was cursing at him because of a disagreement. The sword spirit shrank back and didn't speak anymore. He muttered in his heart, "Damn you. I have serious doubts about what you said just now. Damn it. You just said that you cherished me. And then you scolded my whole family for being dead bodies. To think that I was touched just now." This guy was clearly on the verge of exploding. Whatever he said now would just be asking for a snub. Better not to say anything. Chu Yang looked at the injuries of the others and was slightly relieved. Except for Rui Butong, who was still like a pile of rotten meat in the corner, the others were not in danger of dying. Dong Wuxiang had already regained consciousness. He struggled to stand up. With sweat dripping down his face, he stretched out his hand and pulled the broken ribs back to their original positions. Then he reconnected the broken bones of his right arm one by one. He was in so much pain that his face turned deathly pale. Large beads of sweat rolled down his face. He hissed in cold air as he said, "It really hurts." His hands continued to move. Emole was angry and distressed at the same time. He lowered his head and scolded angrily, "I've never seen such a hothead. There's a godly doctor here. Would it kill you to wait for a while? Why do you have to do it yourself?" Dong Wuxiang grinned. Rolling his eyes, he said, "What do you know? If it's boss's doing, then it's not worth it. It would only be more painful than if I did it myself." As he said this, he stood up and walked over to Rui Butong, who was almost smashed into pieces. He scolded, "This guy really died a disgusting death this time." With a bang, he kicked Rui Butong and sent him flying. Everyone was stunned. Chu Yang felt somewhat relieved when he saw that the other people's lives weren't in danger. Heaving a long sigh of relief, he carried the unconscious Mo Qinggu into the room and put her down. Then he came out to carry the others. It was only at this moment that he couldn't forget that voice and those words. "She is little Tian Tian. She is a girl. She saved you. She is pregnant with your child." Child. Chu Yang's heart trembled. There was a complex feeling in his heart that he didn't know how to describe. He thought back to those years when he was fighting with the Golden Horse Riders Department in the forest of Beyond the Heavens sect. Then, he was poisoned by the Lust Dragon and was on the verge of death. At that time, only Tai Butian and the shadow couple were by his side later. When he woke up, he didn't know what had happened. And the sword spirit also happened to be asleep during that time. It was only when he was about to leave that he knew that he had been saved by someone. Just as he was about to ask, Tai Butian casually diverted the question. He remembered that he was so angry at that time that he grabbed Tai Butian by the neck and lifted her up. He shouted at her furiously and threw a tantrum, almost strangling her to death. It was only now that he knew that the person who saved him and gave up everything for him was actually her. It was actually her. Chu Yang's heart ached. Wu Qianqian had already sacrificed enough. Then, what about Tai Butian's sacrifice for him? She had sacrificed her virginity to save his life. She knew that he loved her, but she chose not to say it out loud, enduring it silently. Even when facing him, she still had to work hard to suppress her emotions and forcefully pretend to be his friend. How did she feel? She had a child and she gave birth to it silently. If Wu Qianqian hadn't told him today, would he have been kept in the dark for the rest of his life? Thinking of this, Chu Yang's heart ached. He felt guilty and angry. That girl is too stubborn, isn't she? He thought of the poem that Tai Butian recited out of emotion when he left the lower three heavens. Chu Yang's heart trembled again, as if the softest part of his heart had been touched. In that instant, he seemed to understand Tai Butian's feelings a little. The autumn wind sets and the sun sets, the heavens are dim. After the vicissitudes of life pass, the heavens are left alone to ponder. I sigh softly that heroes fail to live up to a woman's expectations. Thinking of this poem, a young king in a yellow robe and a crown seemed to appear in front of Chu Yang's eyes. With his hands behind his back, he looked down at the world with disdain. However, When this young king turned around and glanced at him, his eyes were filled with desolation and sadness. Sigh. Chu Yang heaved a long sigh. I had thought that I had left in a carefree and unrestrained manner, but I didn't expect that I had unknowingly thrown away my roots. I had thought that I had a clear conscience, and that I was doing others a favor, but I didn't expect that I would owe a huge debt. I sigh softly that heroes fail to live up to a woman's expectations. I'm not a hero, but how many have I let down? Tai Butian, at that time, I only thought that you were talking about me and Qianqian, but I never thought that you were talking about yourself. He clenched his teeth lightly and thought to himself, if I see that bastard again, I must give him a good spanking. He actually hid such a big matter from me. Thinking of this, Chu Yang became angry again. He muttered, without me, what are you going to give birth to? You actually didn't say anything. This is simply intolerable. Thinking of this, he was a little puzzled. Tai Butian. He had once suspected that she was a girl, and had even secretly observed her several times. Every time, he saw that she was clearly a man. She had an Adam's apple, no breasts, no buttocks. How did she suddenly become a woman? Minister Chu was a little distressed. Damn it, that fellow was quite handsome as a man. But if she was a woman, I'm afraid she would definitely be flat. This time cough cough, I'm at a disadvantage also my child. I don't know how old is he. What does he look like? Just as he was letting his imagination run wild, a rustling sound came from the main door. A snow sleigh stopped at the door. Feng Yuro and Yu Lingxue walked down slowly from the snow sleigh. The Moon Breeze couple spent a lot of effort to carry Wu Jueqing down from Mount Xingyun. It was easy to go up the mountain, but difficult to go down. Especially after the snow, it was even more dangerous. The Moon Breeze couple could only move temporarily, and were far from being able to recover their cultivation and use their internal energy. They were really worse than ordinary people. Just on the way down the mountain, the two of them almost fell off the cliff together with Wu Jueqing several times. After much difficulty, they finally reached the foot of the mountain. They waited for a long time before a snow sleigh passed by. Yu Lingxue paid 10 times the price, almost begging the merchant to buy the snow sleigh. He carried Wu Jueqing onto the snow sleigh, as if he was serving his ancestor, patting him with thick leather cushions. Only then did they drive the snow sleigh back to Tianji City. When had Yu Lingxue ever begged anyone in his life? Today was also a first. As a mid-grade supreme martial artist, he begged a merchant. This was really an unprecedented first. This made Yu Lingxue sigh with emotion. It was as if he had a deeper understanding of life. They had the snow sleigh, but they still couldn't come back just like that. Because a battle must have already begun in Tianji City. If the two of them came back to participate in the battle in their current state, they would undoubtedly be sending themselves to their deaths. Even if they encountered a revered martial artist, he could easily kill these two peak-grade supreme martial artists. And the two of them came back this time for the most important purpose, to save those few little fellows from danger. Now that they didn't have any energy left, they could only resort to trickery. And so, Yu Lingxue had another first in his life, to apply rouge. A rouge specially used by women. The two of them dressed themselves up a little, and changed into a new set of clothes, returning to their usual spotless state. They also used the rouge that Feng Yuro always carried with her to apply on their faces. Instantly their faces glowed. Only then did they pretend to be at ease and drive the snow sleigh back. Along the way, the two of them did not have any cultivation to protect their bodies. They were as cold as chickens that had lost all their feathers. Yet they still had to pretend that they were glowing, handsome, and at ease on the sleigh, as if they were talking about the world. It was really extremely elegant. In Feng Yuro's words, there was no other time in this generation that could be more elegant than today. Before they reached the Orchard Palace, the smell of blood was already very strong. Even though it was snowing heavily, it still couldn't hide that thick murderous aura. The two of them looked at each other and smiled bitterly. Then, they pretended to be even more relaxed and confident as they drove the snow sleigh, chatting and joking as they entered. The man in black only looked from afar and saw the two of them. However, he did not go closer to take a closer look. Otherwise, with his cultivation, he would definitely be able to discover that these two peerless experts who could shake the heavens were now just two paper tigers. He only needed to use a finger to get rid of these two existences that he usually had to look up to. To edit the third chapter, it should be done within 10 minutes. Chapter 1132. However, the Moon Breeze couple had dominated the world for so many years. Their invincible image had long been deeply ingrained in people's hearts. Once this black-clothed man discovered their arrival, he immediately fled, not even daring to turn his head back, afraid that the Moon Breeze couple's divine sense would detect his identity. After all, he had just killed the Moon Breeze couple's disciple. Under such circumstances, how could he still dare to stay? If the Moon Breeze couple were fine, they would definitely go crazy upon seeing their disciple dead. He couldn't even defeat one of them, let alone two of them. The Moon Breeze couple finally reached the door. They wanted to get off the sleigh, but found it very difficult. Their bodies were almost stiff. The husband and wife smiled bitterly at each other, and could only put on a mushy look of endless love. Yu Lingxue got off first, and then put on an elegant look. With a smile on his face, he reached out to help Feng Yuro get off the sleigh. Feng Yuro rolled her eyes at him, but helped him down. The two of them behaved just like a sweet couple. So sweet that it was as sweet as honey. But both of them knew that even getting off the sleigh took a lot of energy that they had accumulated for a long time. Their bodies were really frozen stiff. They almost fell straight down and fell on their faces. They got off the sleigh calmly, and saw Meng Charan busily moving people one by one from the courtyard to the room. Chu Yang carried Wu Qianqian, and was walking towards the room. What happened? Feng Yuro was shocked. What happened to Qianqian? Dong Wuxiang had just regained consciousness, and insisted on standing. When he saw the Feng and Yu couple walking over leisurely, he was instantly infuriated. He couldn't help but sneer. Seniors, you're really composed, well-mannered and well-mannered. To be able to remain so calm and composed at such a time, this junior really admires you. Dong Wuxiang had always been unscrupulous. Now that he had encountered such a huge change, he was even more unscrupulous. Seeing the Moon Breeze couple's leisurely appearance, his anger surged, and he mocked him. Feng Yuro blushed. Yu Lingxue chuckled and said, Wuxiang, you're right. You must know that a man must be magnanimous. In the face of the world's storms, he must be indifferent to everything, and have a steady heart. Only then can he reach the peak. If he is impatient and easily angered, if his heart cultivation is not strong, he will inevitably be taken advantage of by his inner demons. Dong Wuxiang sneered and said, If this is the only way to become a supreme martial artist, then this supreme martial artist, what else is valuable about it? She turned her head away and limped into the house. Feng Yuro and Yu Lingxue walked slowly, following the crowd into the house. As he walked, he said, The world is unpredictable. Being calm is the most important thing. Everyone frowned when they heard this. They wished they could punch these two supreme martial artists in the face. Chu Yang and the others hurriedly tidied up the bed as soon as they entered the room. Then, they let the seriously injured lie down. However, they heard a creaking sound behind them. Greatly surprised, he turned his head to look. The Moon Breeze couple's bodies were stimulated by the heater in the room, and they actually started to tremble. Their faces were still flushed, but cold sweat started to form on their foreheads and trickled down, diluting the redness on their faces quite a bit. Chu Yang was startled. What's wrong with you? You bunch of little fools. Yu Lingxue clenched his teeth and trembled. He said hurriedly in a low voice, What else is there to say? Close the door. Silence. Only then did everyone realize that something was wrong. They hurriedly closed the door, and helped the Moon Breeze couple to sit beside the stove. Feng Yuro's body was already tottering. However, Feng Yuro persisted. She walked to Wu Qianqian's side, and reached out to check her pulse. Her face instantly turned pale. Qianqian, It's okay. She won't die. Chu Yang was equally upset. However, he keenly noticed that something was wrong. With Feng Yuro's supreme martial artist cultivation, even if she was sad, how could she lose her composure like this? Moreover, she was so weak now. Chu Yang immediately noticed the abnormality. He hurriedly comforted her. I've already fed her the heaven-nourishing jade. It can protect her primordial spirit. Then we'll hurry up and find the medicine. She'll be fine. Feng Yuro's expression softened slightly. I see. However, she was still worried. She checked her disciple's body. Although Wu Qianqian had no pulse, breathing or heartbeat, her body was soft and still had some warmth. Moreover, her face looked like she was sleeping soundly. Only then did she feel slightly relieved. Once she was relieved, she actually almost fell. Chu Yang hurriedly supported her and brought her to the stove to sit down. Meng Chaoran. Yu Lingxue controlled his voice and maintained a relaxed tone. There's another person on the snow sleigh outside. It's Wu Jueqing. Move him in carefully. Wu Jueqing's back is already broken, and he can't be moved. You have to move him carefully. Don't move this descendant of Chen Feng into 7 or 8 pieces. Meng Chaoran agreed and hurried out. Dong Wushang and the rest couldn't help but want to laugh. Yu Lingxue was actually in the mood to joke at a time like this? Yu Lingxue took a breath and looked sharply at everyone. Everyone immediately understood that Yu Lingxue was definitely not joking. He was using this relaxed attitude to guard against possible enemies in the dark. At this moment, they really couldn't afford to have any more incidents. Everyone was injured to such an extent, and they were still in the Zhuge clan's base camp. If the other party just launched a probing attack, it would be enough to wipe them all out. And it would be effortless. However, everyone's mood rose with astonishment. Because of what Yu Lingxue said, Wu Jueqing, Qin Feng's descendant. What kind of person was Wu Jueqing? He was an ancient legend of the Heavens continent. And now, he was actually captured alive and brought here. At this moment, Meng Chaoran carried Wu Jueqing in. This descendant of Chen Feng had already turned into a popsicle. If not for the fact that he was still breathing, he would almost be a zombie. Just being carried in these few short steps, he had to hover between life and death several times. Such injuries, such weakness, even Chu Yang frowned at the sight of it. But Yu Lingxue signaled for everyone not to make a sound, so they could only keep silent. Yu Lingxue sat for a while before saying lightly, You in the dark, why aren't you leaving? Do you need me to chase you away personally? His voice was slightly higher, but very calm. His voice was still arrogant and domineering. After he finished speaking, he didn't say anything else. After another half an hour, Yu Lingxue suddenly sneered and said lightly, You in the dark, why aren't you leaving? Don't blame me for not giving face to the Zhuge clan. After waiting for a while, Yu Lingxue heaved a sigh of relief and said, It should be fine now. Only then did Chu Yang dare to open his mouth and ask, Elder Yu, I know what you want to ask. Yu Lingxue waved his hand tiredly and panted. Let me take a breather first. As he spoke, his body started to tremble. The trembling became more and more intense. And only after half an hour did he stop trembling. After drinking 4 bowls of ginseng tea in a row, Yu Lingxue said, Listen to me. In this slaying of the Tao battle, our side has achieved complete victory. The Dharma Supreme was hunted down by Lord Z, and his whereabouts are unknown. When Lord Z returned, he didn't say anything about the Dharma Supreme's whereabouts. But according to my estimation, with Lord Z's strength, the Dharma Supreme is probably dead. Even if he survives, it's just a last-ditch struggle. There's nothing to worry about for now. As for the 8 super clans, Yi Di Shaosei, Lan Muxue, Shijing, Qing Chou and the rest of the 8 second grandmasters, all died in this battle. None of the 700 supreme martial artists of the 8 super clans and law enforcement officers survived. This piece of news was like a bomb, exploding everywhere. The atmosphere in the room heated up instantly. Everyone waited with bated breaths, their eyes shining as they listened. Zi Xieching and the rest had actually created such a glorious and unbelievable battle record. Despite being outnumbered, he actually managed to annihilate the entire enemy force. Such a glorious battle record. In the heavenly continent, this was the only time in history. As for me, let's put me and Inai aside. You've all seen that we're seriously injured and our life force has been damaged. For half a year to a year, we probably won't be able to use our internal energy and fight. Yu Lingxue explained simply. Everyone was suddenly enlightened. They were shocked. With the cultivation of the Moon Breeze couple, they were actually injured so badly. Then how tragic was the battle? What about the others? Dong Wushang's face was flushed red. He stood up and said, Elder Yu, it's my fault. I'm wrong. As he spoke, he gave himself 3 consecutive slaps. Good. Daring to say and daring to admit. That's the true nature of a man. Yu Lingxue smiled approvingly. These slaps of yours are indeed deserved. The slaps are very loud, I won't blame you. Everyone laughed. Chu Yang, however, was concerned about another question. What about them? Lord Z tore open the void and flew away, leaving the heavenly continent. She has gone to travel the universe. Yu Lingxue said slowly with an expression of admiration and reverence. Chu Yang gave an indifferent "oh," only feeling a sense of loss. She had left in the end. Before Lord Z left, she asked me to tell everyone to take care. Yu Lingxue said. And she left behind 2 words. What words? Everyone asked. If we meet again in the clouds, please sweep away the fallen flowers in Jiangnan. Yu Lingxue said indifferently. As he spoke, he glanced at Chu Yang intentionally or unintentionally. Chu Yang's eyes lit up. Big brother Buluqing, in the last battle, comprehended the collapse of the heavens and shattered the void. He has already passed the heavenly punishment and gone to the world beyond the heavens. Yu Lingxue revealed Buluqing's whereabouts. His words were filled with respect and envy. Feng Yuro, who was beside the stove, sighed softly. Everyone also heaved a sigh of relief. Buluqing didn't die, that was great. The 3rd person to become a legend in the heavenly continent. After Chen Feng and Lu Yun, the 3rd person to succeed in the collapse of the heavens and shattered the void, Buluqing. Yu Lingxue looked at Chu Yang and said, Lord Z asked us to bring Zi Xiecheng back for you to treat. Chu Yang's heart warmed. He said, I'll do my best to treat her. He knew that Zi Xiecheng had remembered what he had asked her to do. After she displayed her true strength, she had to leave immediately and couldn't come back in time. So she could only ask Moon Breeze to bring Wu Jiuecheng back. After Yu Lingxue finished speaking, he was silent for a moment before asking, What happened here? How did Qianqian get injured? Monthly votes. Chapter 1133. Everyone fell silent. Thinking of the great battle just now, everyone still had some lingering fear in their hearts. Chu Yang briefly recounted what happened. When he reached the end, Yu Lingxue and Feng Yuro exchanged a look, both seeing the doubt in each other's eyes. Black-robed man? Who is that? According to Chu Yang's description, even if this person's cultivation was slightly lower than theirs, it was not by much. There was such an expert in Tianji City now? Could it be the founder of the Zhuge clan, Zhuge Zangqiong? Feng Yuro pondered and said, On the surface, there seems to be only one middle-grade supreme martial artist in Tianji City now. Yu Lingxue frowned and said, This is possible, but also not very likely. Everyone knows that the reason why the Zhuge clan wears hemp clothes is because of Zhuge Zangqiong. Back then, Zhuge Zangqiong's father was Tribulation. After establishing the Zhuge clan, he immediately disappeared for no reason. Later on, news spread that he was dead, but no one knew if he was alive or dead. As a human, Zhuge Zangqiong did not go through mourning in time, and had always been brooding over it. From then on, Zhuge Zangqiong only wore hemp mourning clothes for his entire life. As the clan leader, Zhuge Zangqiong still did this. Naturally, the clansmen followed suit. Over time, the hemp mourning clothes became the symbol of the Zhuge clan. Back then, Zhuge Zangqiong once said, As long as one's life lasts, so does filial piety. For 10,000 years, he has never worn any other clothes. Yu Lingxue frowned. Logically speaking, such filial piety, if he suddenly came dressed in black to ambush Chu Yang and the others, it would be somewhat unreasonable. Feng Yuro nodded repeatedly. At the side, Emolayer was extremely amused. She sneered and said, What the 2 elders said, I feel that it is very wrong. It is understandable that Zhuge Zangqiong has done this since then. But we can't rule out another possibility, which is that the whole world knows that Zhuge Zangqiong is filial, and will always wear hemp clothes. Therefore, no matter what happens, no one will suspect him. But this way, it is greatly convenient for Zhuge Zangqiong to do things secretly. Just like now, the 2 elders have ruled out Zhuge Zangqiong as the first one. To a certain extent, this means that they believe him. Emolayer said, And he is our enemy now. If you believe in the enemy, You've already brought yourself to the path of defeat. But in the current Tianji city, other than the experts left behind by the Zhuge clan to look after the house, there are almost no other supreme martial artists. Yet at this time, a mid-grade supreme martial artist has appeared. Even if it is ultimately proven that Zhuge Tsangqiong did not do it, he is still the biggest suspect now. How can we eliminate him so easily? The Moon Breeze couple fell silent. Everyone nodded. They had to admit that what Mo said made sense. Make the best use of your time to recuperate in these few days. Yu Lingxue said, when your injuries have fully recovered, I will bring you all out of Tianji city. He rolled his eyes and said faintly, as long as the news of us being heavily injured doesn't spread out, as long as they know that we are here, no one in the entire heavenly layer would dare to cause trouble. Everyone smiled and nodded. Yu Lingxue really wasn't boasting. The Dharma Supreme was beaten until his whereabouts were unknown. Wu Jueqing was here half dead. Lu Qing had left. Ning Tianya was seriously injured and had gone into hiding. The 8 second grandmasters had died an unnatural death. In the entire heavens, Moon Breeze was truly invincible, of course, under the circumstances where they didn't know that they were already heavily injured. At this moment, a furious voice came from outside. Fuck you. All of you are still alive, but you didn't care about me. I was already beaten into minced meat, and you even threw me into the snow. Not only that, you actually threw me beside the toilet. Who did it? Who? Dong Wuxiang, was it you? Come out, let me teach you a lesson. It was Rui Budong's voice. Master Rui was really something now. He died 3 times in a day. The first time he died, he came back alive, and his cultivation jumped from 5th grade martial saint to 7th grade martial saint. The second time he died, he came back alive, and his cultivation actually became 2nd grade. And now, the third time he died and became mincemeat. Now he came back alive and kicking. He was actually a 1st grade supreme martial artist. This kind of leveling up method was really unprecedented. The door curtain was lifted and Master Rui walked in casually. When he saw the Moon Breeze couple, he instantly shrank and rubbed his hands. Ah, the two of you are here too. Hee hee. Yu Lingxue rolled his eyes. I heard that you are blaming us for not caring about you. Very unhappy. Rui Butong said obsequiously. No. Did I say that? We share life and death, fortune and misfortune, in the same boat in life and death. Why would I say something like that? Wouldn't it hurt everyone's feelings if I said it? A person who says something like that is practically a bird's egg. Xu Yang, Dong Wuxiang and Mo couldn't help but laugh. This guy really dared to say that. But from a certain point of view, this guy was really just a bird's egg. Yu Lingxue snorted and said, since you know that you are a bird's egg, why don't you sit obediently at the side? Rui Butong repeatedly agreed, and sat down obediently. Everyone was full of admiration. Yu Lingxue was like an experiment using Rui Butong as an experiment. Even though he was a little tired now and his injuries couldn't be concealed, he was able to suppress Rui Butong with just his accumulated power. And this was someone he knew. If he wasn't, what would happen? After Rui Butong sat down, it was as if there was a scorpion stuffed in his butt. He twisted and turned, unable to contain his excitement. He couldn't help but be excited. All along, he had been the weakest and the youngest among the brothers. But now, he had a complete turnaround. The first to reach the supreme martial artist level. Among the others, the highest Chu Yang and Dong Wuxiang were still at the 7th grade. How could Rui Butong not get carried away? At this moment, he couldn't wait to call Gu Duxing up and scold him to his face. Then he would really beat that guy up. Call GMO and Luo Kadi up, and give them a good beating to vent the depression of being bullied for a long time. Of course, he even wanted to beat up Dong Wuxiang, and then go to Chu Yang and challenge him for the position of the boss. But before he could do it, he was suppressed by Yu Lingxue. He was a little unhappy. After twisting for a while, he winked and said, Boss, I've broken through again, hee hee. Chu Yang said lightly. Oh. Rui Butong was stunned. Not getting the surprised reaction he expected, he didn't give up and continued to show off. Boss, do you know what level I've broken through to? Hee. 1st grade supreme martial artist. Chu Yang said lightly. Oh, continue to work hard. Rui Butong was depressed. What kind of reaction was this? When I broke through in the past, everyone was very surprised and very happy. Why was the reaction so dull this time? His face turned pale. Unwilling to give up, he said to Dong Wuxiang, "Fourth brother, I've broken through to the supreme martial artist level." Dong Wuxiang suppressed his laughter and scolded. "What's so great about breaking through? What's there to show off about being a first-grade supreme martial artist? Look at how immature you are. How can you achieve great things with this kind of mentality? Isn't it just a small breakthrough? Bastard, you're simply a villain intoxicated by success. Your ugly face makes me want to vomit. Get out and get wet in the snow." Rui Butong was dumbfounded, his lips trembling. You. He turned to Chu Yang for help. "Boss, look!" Chu Yang shouted angrily. "Get out!" Rui Butong was like a frosted cigar at once. Dejected, he only felt that the joy of breaking through several levels just now had disappeared. He walked out dejectedly, muttering in confusion. What's going on? Something's not right. He had just walked out of the door when he heard deafening laughter coming from inside the room. Like a whirlwind, Rui Butong rushed in again and said angrily, "Great! You're playing with me." Everyone was even more overjoyed. Everyone had long seen Rui Butong's smug look. His breakthrough was indeed amazing. However, they all deliberately kept a straight face and didn't reveal anything. Chu Yang and Dong Wuxiang were even more stern, as they threw this little guy out with a big hot fart. It was only now that they laughed. Inside the room, the atmosphere after the big battle was instantly relaxed. On the bed, Wu Jueqing, who was unconscious with his eyes closed, suddenly let out a faint sigh. Looking at Chu Yang and his brothers laughing and joking, Wu Jueqing couldn't help but think of his brothers back then. For a moment, his heart couldn't help but yearn for the past. "Brothers, where are all of you?" Wu Jueqing lay quietly, listening to the other brothers laughing and joking. He only felt more and more lonely. A wave of depression and anger rose in his heart. "I will avenge all of you. Definitely. Dharma Supreme, you despicable villain. We were both once tribulations and had the same experience. How dare you plot against me too? I won't let you off." Regarding this, Wu Jueqing still couldn't understand even now. The Dharma Supreme had the same goal as him. Keeping him alive was much more helpful than killing him. Why did he plot against him? What good would it do the Dharma Supreme if he died completely in that great array? Other than losing a powerful helper, there was really no benefit at all. As for why he was afraid of competing with him, but he had been with him for so many years. If he wanted to compete, the Dharma Supreme wouldn't be able to beat him no matter what. They hadn't competed for so many years. What was he worried about? Wu Jueqing was extremely puzzled. With a moan, Mo Qinggu woke up. She called out, "Chu Yang! Chu Yang!" The moment she opened her eyes and saw everyone, she was overjoyed. "You're all right? That's great." When the little Lolita heard what happened just now, she couldn't help but burst into tears. She stayed by Wu Qianqian's side and refused to leave no matter what. "I want to take care of Sister Qianqian and thank her personally. As long as she doesn't wake up, I'll take care of her." Mo Qinggu wiped her tears and said, "She saved my big brother Chu Yang. I'm so grateful to her. Sister Qianqian, quickly wake up. When you wake up, I'll give you half of Chu Yang." This sentence made Feng Yuro and Yu Lingxue laugh. Half of a person could be given away. Chapter 1134. In the next few days, everyone was recuperating. Chu Yang also tried his best to treat everyone's injuries. Everyone's injuries were very serious, especially the Moonbreeze couple. Their injuries were even more serious. Chu Yang tried his best, but could only alleviate their injuries slightly and not help them recover. Dong Wuxiang, Mo Lei and Mo Qingwu's injuries were more serious. When it came to serious injuries, for example, being injured by a martial king and being injured by a supreme martial artist were two completely different concepts. Although they were both equally powerful, the injuries of a supreme martial artist would naturally carry the divine consciousness of a supreme martial artist. That was a more subtle kind of destruction, especially the spirit and meridians. The damage was even more serious and not easy to recover. And this time, it was a low-grade supreme martial artist who did it, so the damage was even greater. Therefore, the recovery of everyone's injuries this time was especially slow. The one with the most serious injuries was, of course, Wu Jueqing. Wu Jueqing's injuries had already reached the point where even the sword spirit was somewhat helpless. Chu Yang had once thought of using the heaven-nourishing jade, but was stopped by the sword spirit. The heaven-nourishing jade could only be used to its fullest potential after a person died. Heaven-nourishing, as the name implied, the heaven that needed to be nourished must have already collapsed. If the heaven didn't collapse, why did it need to be nourished? And Wu Jueqing was obviously still breathing now. If he really waited until he was no longer breathing before using the heaven-nourishing jade, Wu Jueqing would also fall into a long deep sleep like Wu Qianqian. He would only wake up when he reached the resurrection grass. The only thing Chu Yang could do now was to use medicine to stabilize Wu Jueqing's injuries for the time being. As for the rest, he could only rely on his own strength to slowly recover before he could talk about other things. Because for someone like Wu Jueqing, he definitely couldn't use heavy pills. Once he did, it would be equivalent to exposing his identity immediately. There were really too many variables. Chu Yang couldn't afford such variables at all now. In these few days, Tianji City was in a state of grief. After the battle on Mount Xingyun, the people of the Zhuge clan waited for a long time and didn't see anyone return. They sent people to Mount Xingyun to check. What they saw scared the hell out of the few people who went to check it out. Mount Xingyun was full of corpses. People of the big clans all died here. When the news spread, the entire Zhuge family was shocked. Many people were sent to Mount Xingyun to retrieve the corpse. Then, they hurriedly reported the news to the other great clans. The entire Sky Layer continent was filled with grief. Every great clan was in mourning and everyone was crying, including the Li clan. Li Xiangxi of the Li clan led his men all the way back to the north and encountered countless interceptions along the way. In the end, other than Li Xiangxi, only 5 people were able to successfully return to the Li clan. The Li clan flew into a rage and swore to take revenge. Diwu clan. Diwu Qingrou's small courtyard. The people we sent were also wiped out? No survivors? Diwu Qingrou's expression revealed shock. This matter was no small matter. The Diwu clan did not have a strong foundation at the moment. 5 supreme martial artists had been seconded at once, which drained half of the Diwu clan's strength. How could Diwu Qingrou not be shocked and heartbroken at the loss of the entire army on Mount Xingyun? Yes, the wrinkles on the old man's face seemed to have deepened. Amazing, Diwu Qingrou sighed. I didn't expect them to have such powerful strength. But Lord clearly agreed to help that Chu Yang. Furthermore, you also told him about our people's clothes. They even killed all of our people. They are truly ungrateful. The old man said angrily. Diwu Qingrou was silent for a while. Then he said, the word Wu wasn't on the clothes of those people. The old man was instantly dumbfounded. The word Wu was on the inside of their clothes. Diwu Qingrou's following words made the old man even more shocked. Then why this? The old man was a little incoherent. Diwu Qingrou's expression was complicated. You thought that I was really helping Chu Yang. Actually, what I really helped him with was those few pieces of information. And Chu Yang also understood. Diwu Qingrou said lightly. Chu Yang thanked me for those few pieces of information, but seemed very indifferent towards the most important one. Diwu Qingrou said slowly. He also had hope but didn't fully believe it. May I know the reason why you did this? The old man asked. Diwu Qingrou smiled bitterly. Because our Diwu clan can't afford to lose. In this battle, in fact, we're trying to win from both sides. If the big clans win, then they don't need to expose their identities. If the big clans lose, they only need to tear their clothes and reveal the word Wu. Then they can save their lives. If they're evenly matched, then they'll tear their own clothes and reveal the word to guide them to escape. At that time it'll be helpful. For this battle, I had 3 plans. No matter what, I had to protect the supreme martial artists of our clan. Diwu Qingrou let out a long sigh. I didn't expect that after all my scheming, I still couldn't save them. The old man next to him was completely stunned. If so, wouldn't Chu Yang have been deceived for nothing? This was too sinister, wasn't it? Besides, after Chu Yang left, you told me that kind of argument. Wouldn't you be deceiving me too? Diwu Qingrou saw through his thoughts. He said slowly, I'm not deceiving you. It was snowing heavily at that time. I was afraid that Chu Yang wouldn't go far and would come back to eavesdrop. Indeed, that would be really bad. The old man was relieved at once. Besides, on Chu Yang's side, you can't guess what he's thinking. He'll still make arrangements even if he's half convinced. Diwu Qingro laughed. If not, he wouldn't be Chu Yang. It's just that I didn't expect things to be so bad. Diwu Qingro let out a long sigh. Let's take the bodies back to the clan and bury them grandly. We can only take one step at a time in the future. Fortunately, there's no clear falling out with Chu Yang's side. He sighed softly. Let's see what Chu Yang does in a few days' time. Diwu Qingro was right. At first, Chu Yang was a little dubious about the experts prepared by the Diwu clan. Later, when he was 70 to 80% convinced, he suddenly remembered, on the surface, he was the weaker party. Diwu Qingrou's move had greatly exposed the Diwu clan's suspicions. How could the other clans not see through such an obvious waterproof plan? Once they did, they would break out of the encirclement and be safe. But the Diwu clan would definitely be destroyed. Diwu Qingro wouldn't be so noble as to sacrifice himself for others, let alone his entire clan. Chu Yang definitely wouldn't believe it. Therefore, after he briefed Bulu Qing and Moon Breeze, he didn't mention this matter at all when Zi Xiecheng left. The key to the success or failure of this matter was still Zi Xiecheng. Zi Xiecheng was the main force. Chu Yang even thought, if this wasn't the case, it must be Diwu Qingrou's scheme. If Zi Xiecheng killed those few supreme martial artists, it wouldn't be a bad thing. That night, after Chu Yang checked on everyone's injuries, he returned to his room. These few days have indeed been very peaceful. Chu Yang immersed his consciousness into the tribulation space and accepted the cleansing of his soul by the primordial violet vapor. With Moon Breeze here, the Zhuge clan can only try their best to avoid conflict with us. They definitely won't take the initiative to look for trouble. The sword spirit laughed. You must be very anxious these few days? Chu Yang squinted. I am indeed anxious. I have to suppress my aura every day. Otherwise, Wu Jueqing won't discover me. But the sword intent in his body can definitely discover me. The sword spirit smiled bitterly. Once it discovers me, the sword intent will become agitated. Once it becomes agitated, Wu Jueqing will know. If it becomes too agitated, Wu Jueqing will be agitated to death. This matter is a little too aggrieved. It's clearly something that belongs to me. Not only do I have to control my desire now, but it's still a long way from getting it back. If Wu Jueqing really fully recovers one day, it'll be even more troublesome. Chu Yang was speechless. After thinking for a long time, he said, I do have an idea. What idea? The sword spirit's eyes lit up and he asked excitedly. He couldn't wait to withdraw the sword intent. Can you make the sword intent agitated without exposing yourself? Chu Yang asked. This, the sword spirit said awkwardly. It's very difficult. Very difficult means it's possible. Chu Yang interrupted. Then there's an idea. The sword spirit was dumbfounded. Very difficult means it's possible? What kind of argument is this? In the next few days, Chu Yang started to treat Wu Jueqing gradually. However, he was very careful. His injuries would get better one day, but worsen the next day. Every time, Chu Yang himself would be very surprised. What's going on? Not only was Chu Yang surprised by this, Wu Jueqing was also surprised. Because when he tried to mobilize some energy and started to recover, he would find that it would disappear without a trace after a nap. What was going on? Wu Jueqing himself was also a divine doctor. Naturally, he knew that Chu Yang was doing his best to treat him. Furthermore, every part of the treatment was very accurate. Some were even ingenious that he had never thought of. As an expert, he had only gratitude towards Chu Yang. There was absolutely no doubt about it. Then the problem lay with his body. But what problem could there be with his body? Wu Jueqing tried his best to check his body, but he couldn't find anything. Another day later, Wu Jueqing discovered that his condition had worsened even more. And now, he finally discovered where the problem lay, the sword intent. The sword intent was rapidly absorbing his energy. Every time he mobilized a little, it would absorb a little. In his current state, there was no way he could resist its absorption at all. If he was in his complete state, This bit of loss could be recovered with a breath. He wouldn't take it to heart or notice it at all. But at a time like this, it was completely life-threatening. I'm still struggling at death's door. How am I going to recover if you absorb my energy like this? Chapter 1136. Early in the morning, in front of the gate of the Zhuge clan. The Zhuge clan was holding a funeral these few days. There were white flowers at the gate, and the whole street outside the gate was filled with baskets of white flowers. It was quite a spectacular sight. It snowed heavily for a whole month, and only stopped today. There were still sporadic snowflakes falling from the sky, and the sky was still gloomy. The guards were dressed in hemp clothes with hemp ropes around their waists. There were white flowers pinned on their chests, and they looked sorrowful. There was a solemn atmosphere between heaven and earth. There were cries in the inner court. Today was the day of the funeral of the dozens of supreme martial artists who had died. At this moment, the guards' eyes moved, and they revealed a look of surprise. In the distance, there was a sea of white flowers, and a black-clothed man was walking towards them confidently. He was alone, but he was so conspicuous. The white snow and the white flowers were like a sea. The world was snow-white, but suddenly there was a touch of black. The two guards were surprised. The people who came and went these few days, even if they were from other clans, were all dressed in white. It was as if there was only white left between heaven and earth. Why was there still someone dressed in black coming at this time? The black-clothed man walked over leisurely with his hands behind his back. His steps were relaxed, and his eyes looked at the words written on both sides of the wall. He looked here, there, and here. His expression was relaxed and confident, but his actions were like a country bumpkin who had suddenly entered a big city. There was an indescribable sense of novelty and curiosity, and there was a kind of admiration of how fun, how spectacular. But now it was the saddest time for them, the time of the funeral. Such a person had actually appeared. He was simply deliberately attracting their anger. The anger in the hearts of the two guards started to burn bit by bit. In the distance, a few more white-clothed people came to offer their condolences. They were from other clans. They were dressed in white and walked very quickly. Not long after, they overtook the black-clothed man in front. One of them turned his head and looked as if he wanted to say something, but the other covered his mouth and dragged him over. He hurriedly greeted them and entered the gate. He didn't even look back. The black-clothed man came to the gate, and his gaze was still wandering around. The two guards held back their anger and said, "Who are you, and what are you here for?" The black-clothed man tilted his neck. "Oh," he nodded. She smiled and then continued to look at the white flowers that stretched to the horizon. He clicked his tongue and said, "So many white flowers, so beautiful. Motherfucker. How many people must have died? TSK, TSK, TSK. So pitiful, so pitiful. There's another batch of orphans and widows in the world." The guard was furious. "So you're here to cause trouble?" The black-clothed man rolled his eyes and said angrily, "How can a gatekeeper like you speak like that? What do you mean by causing trouble? I have a kind heart. My heart is filled with the sufferings of the world. How did I become a troublemaker when I expressed my feelings today? Could it be that this dead person didn't leave behind a widow or an orphan? Aren't these orphans and widows pitiful?" The two guards trembled with anger and drew their swords. "Who are you?" The black-clothed man didn't even look at them. He said, "Please report to Clan Master Zhuge that Chu Yang has come to offer his condolences. At the same time, he also wants to discuss some matters with Clan Master Zhuge." As soon as he heard the name Chu Yang, the two guards were dumbstruck, as if they had been struck by lightning. Who was the person that the Zhuge clan was most afraid of? Chu Yang. Or rather, the forces on Chu Yang's side. Because these more than 50 supreme martial artists who had all died in the hands of Chu Yang's forces. In the battle of slaying of the Tao, all of them were wiped out, and the other party naturally won a complete victory. The other party could still achieve such an impressive result in the face of the combined forces of the 8 super clans and the law enforcement officers. This kind of strength was terrifying. "Please wait for a moment, I'll go in and report." One of the guards cupped his fists and bowed. His gaze was complicated. He looked at Chu Yang with fear and anger, then turned and went in. Chu Yang walked in circles at the door with his hands behind his back. He kept laughing and saying, "Spectacular. Really spectacular. Really fucking spectacular." The other guard was so angry that he trembled all over. But he didn't dare to say anything. Finally, the guard who went in to report hurriedly came out. "Clan Master invites you to meet him in the morning hall." Then a person walked out quickly and bowed. "Thank you for coming to offer your condolences. The entire Zhuge clan is very grateful." Chu Yang smiled and cupped his fists. "It's okay. Regardless of friend or foe, there's always a battle. These formalities still have to be done." When others came to offer their condolences, their faces were all solemn. Even if they were happy, they would pretend to be grieving. But this guy was not only full of smiles, but the words he said made people want to punch him to death on the spot. The muscles on the face of the person who came out to receive the guest spasmed. His eyes revealed deep hatred. He held it in and said, "No matter what, it's a kind gesture that you can come." Chu Yang laughed and walked forward. He murmured, "Kind gesture. Kind gesture. Hee 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 hee." The person behind almost ground his teeth to pieces. But finally, he brought young Master Chu all the way to the morning hall. They actually walked for quite a long time. Along the way, Chu Yang looked as if he was admiring the scenery. He clicked his tongue in wonder. "So nice. This house is so nice. These flowers and trees are so stylish. They must have been here for tens of thousands of years. This place is so big. I don't know how many people's houses have been taken over. This place is so beautiful. Sigh. Just a random brick, and an ordinary family won't have to worry about food and water for the rest of their lives." His words were strange. His voice was strange. His posture was strange. His tone was strange. The person who led the way didn't make a sound. He tried his best not to make a sound. He was afraid that once he opened his mouth, he wouldn't be able to control himself, and cursed the 18 generations of this guy's ancestors. The morning hall was very big. The people inside were dressed in snow-white clothes. It was densely packed. All the trumpeters and drummers in Tianji City were here. Once someone came to offer their condolences, the sound of the drums would rise and fall. According to the rules of the heavens, once a family member passed away at over 100 years old, they would be considered to have lived a long life. On the day of the funeral, trumpeters and drummers would come and play for the whole day. Amidst the mournful music, they would send the family member to paradise. The people from the Zhuge clan who had died this time were all more than 100 years old. There were dozens of people who were more than 100 years old. Once they entered the morning hall, they saw countless people squeezed here. Everyone looked solemn. In the morning hall, the people from the Zhuge clan were dressed in mourning clothes. They stood in 4 neat rows on both sides. At the back of the morning hall, there were sobbing sounds. It was the womenfolk of the deceased who were crying. The number 1 pharmacist of the Southeast Law Enforcement Officers, the number 7 pharmacist of the Medicine Valley, Chu Yang, is here to offer his condolences. The person who shouted the number received the note and shouted without hesitation. Only after shouting did he realize what he had shouted. He was so scared that he trembled. His hand shook, and the note fluttered to the ground. In an instant, the entire space fell silent. "Chu Yang? Why is he here?" It was only a moment of silence. The trumpeters and drummers around suddenly started playing. In the silence, it seemed even louder and louder. It resounded through the clouds. But immediately after, the trumpeters and drummers also realized that something was wrong. Why did the name come out? Why did everyone keep quiet? Even the womenfolk inside stopped crying. Then they stopped again. With this change, it was as if someone had stomped on a dog. The dog barked and quickly ran away. The people from the Zhuge clan who welcomed the guests came forward. Their faces were stiff and somewhat forced. "Thank you for coming to offer your condolences. Please come in." On the day of the funeral, no matter how big the world was, the deceased were the most important. Therefore, the Zhuge clan was most afraid of any accidents happening on this day. But most people would not take advantage of this time to create trouble, because creating trouble at this time was an irreconcilable enmity. In the future, both parties would not rest until one side was dead. They would fight forever, until one side was completely annihilated. And Chu Yang came at this time. This was equivalent to expressing his attitude. "I, Chu Yang, will not rest until one side is dead with the Zhuge clan. And there was a deeper layer of consideration. Chu Yang was not a reckless person. How could he not know that it was very inappropriate for him to come today? No matter how big the enmity was, a person's death was the most important thing. It was immoral to disturb on the day of the funeral. But if Chu Yang did not come today, there would be endless trouble in the future. If something went wrong, he might not be able to leave this Tianji city forever. Everyone on his side would lose their lives. The reason for this was thought-provoking. Chu Yang chuckled and said gently, "It's my duty, it's my duty. No matter what, I can't absolve myself from the blame for the deaths of all of you elders." When he said this, the faces of those few people instantly became distorted. Why do you have to do this? You already have the upper hand. They have already died in your hands. Why do you have to do this on the day of their funeral? Isn't this going too far? Please come in. The usher led Chu Yang in. Inside the morning hall, the usher stepped aside, and only Chu Yang was left. Thousands of sorrowful and indignant gazes shot towards him from all directions. Chu Yang took 2 steps forward and received the incense and candles. He stood up straight, bowed, and said in a loud voice, "Alas, all of you have unfortunately passed away. Your former heroic reputation has turned into sorrow. After the storm, you are insignificant. Jiang Hu's iron blood is comparable to the legends. I pay tribute to you in the past. Who dares to challenge you?" White mountains and black waters faced the ocean. Your name spread far and wide. How many orphans were raised by you? How many widows and widows were hurt by you? Just a word of disagreement, and you drew your sword. Who dares to speak out when your clan is powerful? White bones under your hands piled up like mountains. Blood under your hands flowed in the 4 seas. When you pass away today, the world goes crazy. Singing and dancing, resentment and hatred are repaid. From now on, who will be the strongest in the world? Alas, I pay tribute to you." Then, Chu Yang took a step forward and inserted the incense and candles into the incense burner. He bowed again and raised his head. When these words came out, the entire Zhuge clan became silent. Even a trumpeter outside, who was a little closer, heard these words. He was so scared that his face turned pale. The trombone in his hand fell to the ground. He didn't dare to pick it up. Everyone in the morning hall was livid. They looked at Chu Yang with eyes that seemed to spit fire. A few people's facial muscles trembled. They couldn't control themselves and took a step forward. They wanted to settle the score with this guy. "Chu Yang, what do you mean?" One of them jumped out and glared at Chu Yang. Today's first update. Something really happened yesterday. I was so angry that my whole body trembled. I couldn't calm down for a long time. If it was just a book review, it would be fine. But someone actually didn't hesitate to subscribe to the group. He found my QQ number and wrote a copy in advance. He crazily scolded me. Filthy words, it's simply. Sigh. Before I could come back to my senses, he was already gone. Then he blacklisted me. I wanted to scold him back, but I couldn't. I held my breath just like that. I was so angry that my face turned green. My whole body trembled for a long time. I couldn't write any more words. My head was buzzing like glue. Then, I went to deal with the book review. I wanted to calm down, but I saw a bunch of things that didn't go well. I was so angry that I broke down. I couldn't help but vent my anger. I made a fool of myself. This is today's first update. I will continue to write the second update. Please support me with your monthly votes. Thank you. G. To be continued. Chapter 1137. Cough, I'm confused. The previous chapter should be chapter 418. I typed it wrongly. I can't change the name of the chapter. Please forgive me, everyone. G. Whether it's an enemy or a friend, we have to respect them. Chu Yang looked up and said, "The dead are the most important. I'm here to offer my condolences. Does the Zhuge clan not even have this little bit of tolerance?" Zhuge Yunshan, who had been standing at the head of the table, said with a gloomy face, "Brother Chu, you're not here just to offer your condolences, right?" Chu Yang smiled and said, "You're really wise. I'm here for a few matters. The first is to offer my condolences to the elders. The second is to discuss some matters with you. As for the third matter, I'm also here to invite you for help." Zhuge Yunshan's eyes flashed. "Divine Dr. Chu, Do you mean that it's not convenient to discuss in detail here? Chu Yang said straightforwardly. Clan head, please move to another place. I'll talk to you face to face. Zhuge Yunshan pondered for a while and said, You all stay here and take care of things. I'll have a good talk with Divine Dr. Chu. Someone roared. What's the point of talking to this kind of person? Just beat him to death and throw him out. Zhuge Yunshan said angrily. Shut up. What day is it today? How dare you be so presumptuous? After today, go to the clan's discipline hall immediately to receive your punishment. Then he turned around and said to Chu Yang, Divine Dr. Chu, please. Chu Yang smiled and said, Please. He followed Zhuge Yunshan out. Behind there was a commotion. The people of the Zhuge clan were about to go crazy. One by one they cursed. They came to the study room of the Zhuge clan. After they sat down, Zhuge Yunshan ordered the servant to serve tea. He then said, Divine Dr. Chu, what do you want to tell me? Please say it clearly. Chu Yang smiled lightly and did not say anything. Instead, he asked strangely, Clan head, do you think that I'm right to come here today? No matter how good Zhuge Yunshan's self-restraint was, he almost jumped up in anger because of this sentence. You've been humiliating the living and the dead today. You've been scolded. Do you think that you're right to come here? Now, you've actually taken advantage of the situation and asked me directly. Do you think that you're right? Divine Dr. Chu, do you think that you've come at the right time? Zhuge Yunshan held back his anger and asked lightly. Yes, Chu Yang said resolutely and decisively. Coming here today is really the right choice. Zhuge Yunshan's face instantly turned purple. He lifted his head and looked at Chu Yang fiercely. Chu Yang, aren't you going a little too far? That's not true. My coming here today is also a great thing for your Zhuge clan. Chu Yang said frankly. How is this going too far? Zhuge Yunshan said angrily. You came here today to mock and ridicule us, and it's a good thing? How preposterous. Chu Yang sneered and said, Clan Master Zhuge, may I ask how the Zhuge clan is feeling today? Did anyone discuss revenge? Was there anyone who was plotting something? Master Zhuge, you can't possibly say that you don't know, right? Zhuge Yunshan was speechless. Indeed, in the past few days, the Zhuge clan had been discussing revenge. It was all thanks to the efforts of the higher-ups that this wave was temporarily suppressed. And today's funeral would only make the Zhuge clan's wave of revenge even more ferocious. Zhuge Yunshan was still worried about this matter previously, because after today, the atmosphere had reached its boiling point. It could no longer be suppressed. Forcefully suppressing it with an iron fist might instead cause internal strife. Since Clan Master Zhuge doesn't say anything, I'll take it that you've agreed. I'll only say one thing. If your people go to take revenge, what will happen? Chu Yang sneered. He said indifferently, We won't do things like showing mercy. This sentence was said without any trace of politeness. But Zhuge Yunshan started to ponder. Such a thing was definitely not impossible. Instead, it was already being prepared. It was definitely possible. Chu Yang said lightly, Today I've come here alone. I'm here to remind all of you not to do such a thing, to die for nothing. Zhuge Yunshan pondered for a while and said lightly, Divine Dr. Chu, are you really so kind to come here today? Chu Yang said lightly, Is there any other possibility? Zhuge Yunshan sneered and said, After the battle of slaying Tao, your side has also suffered heavy losses, right? Even if our family were to act rashly and go there, it would still be possible for us to wipe you all out in one fell swoop. And Divine Dr. Chu is worried about such a thing now, right? Chu Yang was actually worried about this matter, because the Zhuge clan had already become a mourning army. In such a situation, coupled with the funeral's fuse, there would be a few hotheads who would rush over. But why would he admit it now? He sneered and said, Clan Master Zhuge can go over now. Zhuge Yunshan stared at Chu Yang and said, But Divine Dr. Chu shouldn't be so kind to remind us. Chu Yang looked back at him without backing down and said lightly, Of course there's a reason. Because I also have a request for the Zhuge clan. What request? Zhuge Yunshan asked. My third uncle Chu Feiyan has been detained by you. Chu Yang's face revealed a trace of indignation. Clan Master Zhuge, is this the method of a big clan? There's such a thing? Zhuge Yunshan's eyes flickered. If clan master is willing to say that you don't know, then I'll take my leave. Chu Yang stood up and said. From now on, I can only stay in Tianji City permanently. This place is covered in white snow, and the scenery is very good. How would Zhuge Yunshan allow this bastard to stay in Tianji City permanently? It's okay if you stay here permanently, but you still have the Moon Breeze couple. If they also stay in Tianji City with you, then how can the Zhuge clan survive? Slow down, slow down. Divine Dr. Chu, please don't be impatient. Zhuge Yunshan hurriedly stopped him and tried to persuade him to stay. He smiled and said, I think your third uncle must have been caught by mistake when we were searching for suspicious people. Or else our Zhuge clan, after all, would not do such a thing. Chu Yang sneered and said, Caught by mistake? Yes, maybe it was by mistake. Zhuge Yunshan laughed dryly. Since it was by mistake, Clan Master Zhuge, please help me to release them. Chu Yang said lightly, This is the first thing that I need your permission to do. Zhuge Yunshan heaved a sigh of relief and said, Release? Haha. Divine Dr. Chu, you're asking me to release him with such an attitude? Chu Yang stood up and said, Actually, I also don't want to. It's the Moon Breeze couple who specially requested the Zhuge clan to release him on account of their friendship with the Zhuge clan. Since you're not willing, then I'll go back and report truthfully. Zhuge Yunshan's face changed. He hurriedly stood up and stopped him. This, of course, can be discussed. Since the Moon Breeze couple gave the order, then. Haha. What did the Moon Breeze couple say? Chu Yang said. At that time, the Moon Breeze couple did not say anything. But the Moon Breeze couple did. The Moon Breeze couple said, Tell the Zhuge clan to release him. Otherwise, the two of us will go to the Zhuge clan's back garden for a stroll. Anyway, we haven't seen the sky for a long time. It's a good time to take a look at the sky. Chu Yang said, I don't quite understand this sentence. I can only tell you the exact words, and will not explain further. The sky is the sky, I know this. But why must we go to the Zhuge clan's back garden to see it? Zhuge Yunshan smiled bitterly in his heart. What explanation is there for this sentence? This Tsangqiong is not the same Tsangqiong. Our elder is called Zhuge Tsangqiong. The Moon Breeze couple also said that Lord Wu Jueqing's injuries are serious, and they want to bring him out to look for medicine to treat his injuries. But with so many mundane matters, it's hard for them to leave. If there's really no other way, they can only send people out, and the two of them will wait in Tianji City. Zhuge Yunshan said generously, Even if the Moon Breeze couple didn't have such a wish, our Zhuge clan will not hold innocent people and not release them. Divine Dr. Chu, please wait for a while. I'll go take a look at this matter and give you an explanation immediately. Divine Dr. Chu, please report back to the Moon Breeze couple. He thought to himself, They're indeed powerful. Even a person like Wu Jueqing has been captured. It's better to send such malefic people away as soon as possible. With them here, our Zhuge clan won't even have the appetite to eat. Chu Yang smiled and said, I'll go with you, Clan Master Zhuge. Clan Master Zhuge was captured by mistake. You probably don't know my third uncle. If I don't go, do you expect the Zhuge clan to release all the people they've captured? Zhuge Yunshan was stunned. He smiled bitterly and said, All right. He had just said that he didn't know who his third uncle was, and then released the person in question. Wouldn't that be slapping his own mouth? But it was also a little inappropriate to bring Chu Yang in, because the prison was a secret place of the Zhuge clan, and many important people were imprisoned there. And after capturing Chu Feiyan, the Zhuge clan thought that he was a rare commodity worth hoarding, and naturally wanted to lock him up properly. Naturally, he was also imprisoned in that kind of place. Who would have thought that this guy would actually use the tiger skin as a flag, and directly come to their door to ask for him? Even threatening and frightening, his attitude was arrogant and unbearable. If he didn't give him up, he wouldn't be able to get through the Moon Breeze couple. If he gave him up, wouldn't it be a waste of effort? What should he do if he didn't give him up? Zhuge Yunshan was extremely conflicted. Just as he was thinking, he heard Chu Yang say, How is it, Clan Master Zhuge? To be honest, I've done your clan a big favor, right? Huh. Zhuge Yunshan was surprised. What the heck? What are you saying? In the end, it's you doing us a big favor? Chu Yang laughed and said, Isn't it so? Don't tell me that with the power of the Moon Breeze Elders, you can't even save one person? Zhuge Yunshan only felt that his stomach was full of bitterness. He nodded repeatedly and said, Divine Dr. Chu's great kindness and righteousness, the Zhuge clan will always be grateful. He had no choice but to bring Chu Yang along. He thought to himself, quickly send this guy away. Let them leave Tianji City far away. In the future, the big clans won't care about this guy anymore, and just focus on preparing for the Tribulation Sword Master. Of course, when the time is right, I'll also give this guy a hard time. But I must not be caught red-handed. Chu Yang followed Zhuge Yunshan all the way. After walking for a while, they reached the entrance of the secret prison, but it was completely underground. The guard opened the door, and under the escort of 2 experts, the 2 walked all the way in. The further they walked, the darker it became. Continue to write the 3rd update. Begging for monthly votes NG. To be continued. Chapter 1138. After walking for several thousand feet in a zigzag manner, the front suddenly began to brighten up. The tunnel was also a little drier. Luminous pearls hung on the stone walls, emitting a milky white light. After another long stretch of road, they started to head downwards. When they were halfway down, they could hear the sound of surging water outside. It seemed that there was an underground river not far from here. However, the water actually could not seep in at such a close distance. This kind of method could really be considered a work of the gods. After going down for another few hundred feet, Chu Yang suddenly realized that this place had turned into a strange stone wall. It was extremely hard. He tried to grab it, but with his current cultivation, he could not even scratch it. After going down for another few hundred feet, the ground started to stabilize and extend forward. On both sides there were also prison cells. The people in the prison cells were all unkempt and unkempt. Their gazes did not waver as they watched the crowd walk past the door. It could be seen that these people's hearts were already dead. There was no hope. After walking all the way to the innermost part, Zhuge Yunshan asked, The one we just caught, that Chu Feiyan? Where is he locked up? A guard hurriedly said, Just in front, locked up alone. After 2 more turns we will reach. Chu Yang's expression did not change, but he sneered in his heart. How could Chu Yang not see that Zhuge Yunshan was putting on an act? However, after hearing this, Zhuge Yunshan was stunned for a moment. He asked, When was he locked up there? His heart instantly screamed, Oh no! This Chu Feiyan was originally locked up in this row. When did he move to the inside? Inside, there was someone locked up there. Someone took the clan token and transferred to another cell, the guard said helplessly. Zhuge Yunshan's face twitched. He turned to Chu Yang and said, Divine Dr. Chu, since we are already here, why don't you wait here for a while, and I will send him out? Chu Yang smiled faintly and said, Just like what Clan Master Zhuge said, since we are already here, what's the harm in going in to take a look? It's just a few steps. Zhuge Yunshan said bitterly, All right. All right. He glared at the guard fiercely and walked forward. Sure enough, after 3 more turns, the security became even tighter. It was obvious that the security of this cell was at least 10 times higher than that of the other cells. Waves of divine consciousness intertwined back and forth. There were 2 cells in front of him, one on the left and one on the right. The cell on the left, there was one person. His entire body was locked up. His shoulder blades and ribs, his thigh bones and other parts of his body were pierced through by the iron chains, and he was restrained in the cell. However, he raised his head and glared fiercely at the crowd. Chu Yang's eyes flashed. He saw a crescent-shaped mark on this person's forehead. That elder of the 3 Stars Divine Clan? Was this the bargaining chip that Di Wuqing Ro had used to incite a war between the clans? He was actually imprisoned here? At this moment, Chu Yang suddenly understood what Zhuge Yunshan's weird expression meant. So that was what he was worried about. Chu Yang's heart moved as he thought of his own junior martial brother, Tan Tan. That day he had talked with Tan Tan on the mountaintop. I was originally the king of the 3 Stars Divine Clan. The way Chu Yang looked at the 3 Stars Divine Ancestors prisoner became gentler. Junior brother's subordinate. How could Chu Yang help him? Now it was obviously impossible to rescue him together. But, this person is really pitiful, Chu Yang said lightly. Haha, this person has committed a heinous crime. Therefore, he is locked up here as a warning to others, Zhuge Yunshan said with an angry face. Oh, I see. Chu Yang nodded in understanding. So he is a great devil. Zhuge Yunshan smiled and said, yes. However, even if he is a great devil, such cruel torture is really too much, Minister Chu said with compassion. Zhuge Yunshan rolled his eyes. Your side slaughtered more than 700 supreme martial artists in one battle. Isn't that too much? How can you still have such a merciful heart? How about, I still have a piece of dried meat here. Let him eat it. Chu Yang flipped his hand and took out a small piece of venison. It was only half the size of a fist. This is not appropriate, right? Zhuge Yunshan said. As he spoke, he took the dried meat from Chu Yang's hand and examined it. That's right, this was just an ordinary piece of dried meat. There was nothing unusual about it. However, out of caution, Zhuge Yunshan still instinctively chose to reject it. Chu Yang rolled his eyes and said, so stingy. He actually snatched the dried meat and threw it in with a shake of his hand. You. Zhuge Yunshan looked at him speechlessly. It's just a piece of meat. Chu Yang spread out his hands. The piece of meat that he threw and actually slanted a little. It brushed past the person's face and landed on the iron chain at the side. It dangled slightly. That person only needed to tilt his head, and he would be able to eat it. Zhuge Yunshan naturally would not be so stingy. The meat had already gone in. How could he go in and pick it out again? He walked forward with a heavy heart. No one noticed that a faint black smoke filled the air and floated in. Then it floated out again. The person from the 3 Stars Divine Clan, who was locked in the iron chain, seemed to have felt something. His eyes suddenly lit up. He looked at Chu Yang gratefully, turned his head, and put the piece of dried meat into his mouth. He chewed and swallowed it. He said with a muffled voice, thank you. If I can get out of here in the future, I will definitely repay the kindness of this piece of meat. Chu Yang ignored him and followed Zhuge Yunshan to the door of another prison cell. Just as they walked over, one of the people inside had already struggled to get up. He shouted angrily, let me out! Let me out! I don't know anything about the things that you asked. My daughter is still waiting for my medicine to save her life. Let me out, ah! Chu Yang looked inside. Suddenly his heart ached. Instantly his anger rose. He turned to look at Zhuge Shanyan and said word by word, Clan Master Zhuge, this is what you meant by not making things difficult for him? When Zhuge Shanyan saw this, he could not help but be stunned. He muttered, what's going on? There was a person inside. He was skinny and covered in blood. His eyes were lifeless. His treatment was the same as the person from the 3 Stars Divine Clan. His whole body was pierced by iron chains. Some of his bones were exposed. Half of his hair was also torn off. There were 3 or 4 burn marks on his chest. His left leg was twisted in a weird way. With one look, one could tell that it was broken. But his face was square. Although it was full of blood, Chu Yang could still see the shadows of his father Chu Feiling and his 4th uncle Chu Fian. This person was his 3rd uncle Chu Feian. Undoubtedly. But he had suffered such injuries, such torture. At this moment, Chu Yang's anger rose to the sky. He could not wait to kill everyone in the Zhuge clan. I really did not expect this. Zhuge Yunshan was extremely embarrassed. After capturing Chu Feian, he had specially instructed Chu Yang, do not torture him too much. He did not expect that he would end up like this. How could this be called not torturing him too much? This was simply torturing him with all your might. What's going on? Zhuge Yunshan was furious. Aren't you going to release him? Immediately, a guard came over and opened the prison door. He carefully released Chu Feian, although his movements were light. But the iron chains were forcefully pulled out from his flesh and bones. What was the feeling? Chu Feian fainted a few times and woke up again. He gritted his teeth. Chu Yang hurried in and took out medicine. He first applied it on his 3rd uncle and cleaned his body. Then, he took out a bottle of spiritual spring water and fed it to him. Chu Feian felt as if he was in a dream. His body relaxed a lot. The pain was also reduced by half. He asked Chu Yang, who was lowering his head to correct his broken leg, may I know who you are? Chu Yang's heart ached. He said, Third uncle, I'm Chu Yang. Chu Fan was shocked. You are that my big brother that, Chu Yang nodded. I am third uncle. You are fine. Don't worry. Chu Fan smiled with relief. He said, this is great news, child. Your parents have really found you. Haha, great, great, great. Chu Yang forcefully suppressed the bitterness in his heart. However, Chu Fan's continuous ecstasy of that's great almost made Chu Yang tear up. He bent down. He carried Chu Fan on his back and said, third uncle. She is with me now. She is fine. Let's talk when we get out. You should quickly recover your energy. Chu Fan nodded. Then, he opened his eyes wide and said in disbelief, Laura is fine? You are not lying to me? Chu Yang nodded vigorously. She is fine. I've already cured her of her illness. Okay. Chu Fan's eyes suddenly teared up. He said, my daughter is fine, ha. A burst of laughter followed his tears. Then, he lay on Chu Yang's back and fell asleep. Not long after, he started to snore. He was still laughing a moment ago, but the next moment he was already snoring. Chu Yang's heart ached. Who knew what kind of life Chu Fan had been living all these years? It was already not easy to see Duan Shuyi in the Chu clan, but it was even harder for Chu Fan than for his wife. 1,000 times. Because he was a man. He was a husband and a father. Chu Fan's sufferings all these years were really indescribable. He had always been tense, and never dared to rest. He was afraid that if he rested a little more, closed his eyes a little more, and did not work hard enough, his daughter would leave him forever, so he never relaxed himself. Even when he was in the Zhuge clan's prison, it was still the same. Now, when he heard that his daughter was fine, his tensed nerves for more than 10 years finally relaxed. Suddenly he could not take it anymore. He actually fell asleep in ecstasy at such a time. Because he could finally sleep. Because he had not slept in peace for more than 10 years. Because he could finally rest assured. His daughter was saved. Chu Yang's heart ached. Hearing the tired snoring behind him, tears suddenly filled his eyes. Third update, please give me your monthly votes. Chapter 1139. Chu Yang carried Chu Fan on his back and walked out of the cell. He saw Zhuge Yinshan in a rage. What is going on? Zhuge Yinshan's face was dark. As a big clan with a history of 10,000 years, such a thing actually happened. Torturing a prisoner like this was not right in the first place. The person was already caught. Was there a need to torture him like this? Moreover, he was Chu Yang's relative. This was a bargaining chip at the crucial moment. What kind of bargaining chip would you be if you tortured him badly? Other than adding fuel to the fire, there was no other use. How did Third Master Chu get injured? Zhuge Yinshan was furious. The guard bowed and stood trembling. The sweat on his face dripped down. He stammered and did not dare to speak. Speak. Zhuge Yinshan was so angry that his whole body was trembling. He slapped the guard's face, and the guard was sent flying. He spun one round in the air before he landed on the ground. Chu Yang looked at him coldly. Zhuge Yinshan did not look like he was faking it. It looked like he really did not know about this. Otherwise he would not have brought him here. But this did not reduce his hatred towards the Zhuge clan by a little. The guard got up from the ground. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. But he did not dare to hide it anymore. It's its second young master, the guard said while trembling. Zhuge Changchang? Chu Yang asked in a strange manner. Yes. Why? Zhuge Yinshan was surprised. What hatred does Zhuge Changchang have with Chu Fan? Is there a need to torture him like this? It's like this. That day, second young master came with the elder's token. He interrogated a person in the earth room. After he finished, he asked about the person from the Chu clan. Where is he? The guard said with a trembling voice. At that time, Li San'er and I were on duty. So we told him. Then he took the token and came here. After he went in, he said, how can such a bastard be given such preferential treatment? Men, punish him like the bastard from the divine clan. Why? Chu Yang asked. At that time, second young master said, your Chu clan is not in the southeast. Why did you come out to fuck your mother instead of hiding in the southeast? Your little bastard actually dared to steal the woman I fancied. He must be tired of living. Then, second young master began to use all kinds of methods to torture. This Chu. Third master. The guard trembled. He didn't dare to look at Zhuge Yunshan. For Wu Qianqian? Chu Yang asked strangely. The younger brother of the Moon Breeze Supreme Martial Artists. Yes. The guard stammered. At that time, I vaguely heard such a name. Zhuge Yunshan's lips trembled. For a woman. Chu Yang nodded slowly. His eyes became as cold as ice. He squinted and said indifferently. Good. What a Zhuge clan. Zhuge Changchang. No wonder Zhuge Changchang knew so much about Chu Fan. So this guy had actually done such a thing. Zhuge Changchang alone couldn't have accomplished this. You also participated, right? Chu Yang's eyes were cold as he asked. I deserve to die. The guard knelt down in front of Zhuge Yunshan, his entire body trembling. Since you still know that you deserve to die, then you haven't gone mad. Chu Yang said indifferently, and took a step forward. He stepped hard on the guard's shoulder, and stomped down hard. A pitiful cry resounded in the underground cavern. That guard was stepped on by Chu Yang. His entire left shoulder and arm seemed to have been smashed a few hundred times by a mountain-splitting hammer. His entire left shoulder was smashed into pieces. Stop. Even if my clan members make mistakes, they will be punished according to the clan rules. Since when was it your turn? Zhuge Yunshan was furious. You actually dare to commit violence against my clan members in front of me? Chu Yang laughed and kicked the guard out. With a clang, the guard hit the opposite metal door and fell to the ground, turning into a pile of minced meat. The 3 stars divine ancestor elder inside had a look of satisfaction in his eyes. He shouted, Good. This is really fucking satisfying. It seemed that he had also suffered a lot from this guard in this underground prison. Chu Yang kicked the guard out. Then he turned his head and looked at Zhuge Yunshan with disdain. He said arrogantly, I attacked your subordinate in front of you. What are you going to do about it? Zhuge Yunshan was so angry that his face turned purple. He panted and said, Good. Good Chu Yang. I will remember you today. Chu Yang laughed coldly. I don't need you to remember me, because I have already remembered your Zhuge clan. One day, I will definitely come here personally to take revenge and collect the blood debt with my own hands. Zhuge Yunshan's hair almost stood up. He said sternly, The Zhuge clan will be waiting for you anytime. Chu Yang laughed loudly. He carried Chu Fan on his back and led the way. He pretended not to hear Zhuge Yunshan's words. His arrogant attitude made everyone who saw him feel their teeth itch. When he reached the corner, there was a sudden movement in front of him. An elder in sackcloth appeared in front of him and blocked Chu Yang's path. He asked Zhuge Yunshan, Clan Master, who is this? Such a serious criminal. Chu Yang scolded. A good dog doesn't block the way. Get out of my way. The elder was scolded before he could finish his sentence. He was instantly enraged. What a junior. Do you really want to die? Chu Yang took big steps forward and said coldly, You are right. Come kill me. Kill me. Come and kill me. You don't dare to kill me? If you don't dare to kill me, then you are a son of a bitch. Zhuge Yunshan shouted anxiously from behind. Don't be rash. Stop. He stood in front of Chu Yang and explained anxiously. This is Divine Dr. Chu. He is the messenger of the Supreme Martial Artists Ning and Bu. He is the son-in-law of the Supreme Martial Artists Feng and Yu. He is here on the orders of the Supreme Martial Artists to pick someone up. The elder's face was originally purple. He was so angry that he was about to attack. When he heard this prominent identity, he actually trembled violently. He immediately took 2 steps back. The messenger of Ning and Bu, the son-in-law of Feng and Yu. With such an identity, he could really do whatever he wanted in this heavenly continent. Almost 800 supreme martial artists besieged Feng and Yu and Buluqing, but they were all killed by the other party. Luckily, he didn't do anything. This junior was here on orders. If he killed him, no matter which of these people came to find him, it would be a huge trouble. Now that the Zhuge clan had lost more than 50 supreme martial artists, it was at its weakest. If these people came to find him, it would really be a disaster for the clan. The elder took 2 steps back, but still looked at Chu Yang fiercely. But this junior's words were too infuriating. Why? You don't dare to kill me? Chu Yang walked over and looked at the elder from the corner of his eyes. He sneered. I don't think your mother gave you the guts to kill me. Since you don't dare to, why don't you get out of my way? What are you doing here? Waiting for your reward? Or are you addicted to being scolded? Zhuge Yunshan was so anxious that sweat broke out on his forehead. Looks like this guy is mad because of his third uncle's injuries. He actually has the drive to die here. If he doesn't die here, he won't stop? It doesn't matter if you fucking die here. But don't implicate the Zhuge clan. He hurried forward and pushed away the elder who was so angry that he was foaming at the mouth. He came back and led Chuyang out quickly. Grandpa, please leave quickly. I really can't take it anymore. Chuyang said as he walked. Zhuge clan master. Don't you think these people in your clan are asking for it? Just like that person just now. What does it have to do with him? Why did he have to come out and get scolded? Isn't that so? He felt good after being scolded. So, he left with satisfaction. It seems that he came out this time just to get scolded. Isn't this a fucking despicable act? I really can't understand. Zhuge Yunshan led the way in front with a black face, as if he was opening the way for him. Inside, the elder of the 3 Stars Divine Clan couldn't help but smile. This benefactor is really interesting. Thinking about it, he was about to activate his martial arts to dissolve the elixir that this benefactor used to hide in his breast to recover from his injuries. Then he heard his benefactor from the catacombs shouting, My name is Chuyang. I am Chuyang. I came to the Zhuge clan, and now I'm leaving. What? What? Ha ha ha. What a person with character. The elder of the divine clan smiled in his heart. This little one wasn't the kind of person who didn't expect repayment for his kindness. The last sentence seemed to be deliberately to anger the people of the Zhuge clan, but in fact, it was to tell him his identity. Quickly go out. I'll wait for you to repay me. The elder of the divine clan couldn't help but want to laugh. How could there be such a person in this world? You're not a gentleman, you're not a villain. Don't worry, I'll definitely repay you. During this period, the elder of the divine clan had already lost all hope. The agreement with the Diwu clan seemed to have come to nothing. They didn't let him out according to the agreement. Moreover, that Diwu Qingru had also specially come to explain this matter to him. His identity was too important, the security was too tight, and it was not easy to carry out the operation. He could only wait quietly for the right time and slowly plan. But how long would this waiting quietly for the right time and slowly plan take? But this was something that everyone was well aware of. His cultivation was sealed, and he couldn't absorb any energy of heaven and earth here. There was no hope of recovery. How could he get out? But this time, although he didn't know what elixir this young man had put in that piece of deer meat, but after taking it, the elder of the divine clan clearly felt that his dried-up dantian had begun to gather energy, and his cultivation was actually starting to recover step by step. As his cultivation recovered, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth also slowly gathered. As long as he was given some time, he would be able to fully recover. By then, even without external help, he could kill his way out alone. I heard that the Zhuge clan had now lost more than 50 supreme martial artists. Is their strength weak? The elder of the divine clan thought silently, and then he started to cultivate. His whole body slowly emitted a kind of moonlight brilliance. Slowly, the part of the iron chain that bound him and passed through his body, the part inside his muscles, actually began to slowly corrode. To be continued. Chapter 1140. Chuyang shouted and scolded along the way. He scolded everyone in the Zhuge clan's dungeon. Every time he met someone, he would give them a slap in the face. Every slap would knock out at least 2 teeth. Along the way out, many people had already been bullied by him. In the end, Zhuge Yunshan decided to open up a path for him. Whenever he saw people from afar, he would avoid them. Finally out of the cave, Zhuge Yunshan's face was as ugly as the dark clouds in the sky. He said, Chuyang, you have saved your third uncle. It's time to leave, right? Of course I'm leaving. Chuyang rolled his eyes and sneered. Even if the Zhuge clan mobilizes all the beauties in Tianji City to keep me, I won't bother to stay here. Zhuge Yunshan's anger rose. You wish? Mobilizing all the beauties in Tianji City for you? Do you have the right to do that? If that's the case, I won't send you off. Zhuge Yunshan was about to leave. Wait. Chu Yang said, I have other things to do these days. But my third uncle needs treatment urgently, so I won't do it. Clan Master, please pass on a message. What message? Zhuge Yunshan couldn't stay any longer. Elder's Feng, and you asked me to pass on a message to your elder master. Chu Yang said lightly. Zhuge Yunshan's expression turned serious. Elder's Feng, and you wanted to pass on a message to our elder master? Chu Yang snorted and said directly. That's what the two elders said. You can pass on the message to your elder master. Is the man in black you? If it's you, come and apologize. If it's not you, come and clarify. You only have 1 day. If you don't come, we'll go. Zhuge Yunshan's expression changed. Chu Yang carried Chu Feiyan on his back and asked for a blanket from the Zhuge clan. He wrapped it around his third uncle and then left with a sneer. Alone, making a big fuss and returning in style. This arrogance, this unruliness, was simply displayed incisively and vividly. Looking at Chu Yang's back view, Zhuge Yunshan's face showed a thoughtful expression. Chu Yang must have something to rely on. This was inevitable. Otherwise, why would he dare to barge into the Zhuge clan with his strength alone? And the more arrogant he was, the more it showed that his moon breeze and Yu's battle power was not damaged. And his words were laced with threats. In the end, he even brought it up. Get Zhuge Sangqiong to go and apologize. Or clarify. If he was truly weak, why would he do such a thing? Clan Lord, this Chu Yang has gone too far. Why don't we just take him down? Someone at the side asked softly. The man's face flashed with anger, almost unable to contain it. Idiot! Zhuge Yunshan was furious. Do you know why he is so arrogant? He wants us to deal with him. If we attack him, Moon Breeze will have a reason to attack us. Wouldn't that be falling into his trap? But if we kill him, we'll kill him. Even if the Moon Breeze couple were to attack us, what good would it do him? That person said hatefully. Zhuge Yunshan took a deep breath and muttered to himself. Could it be that there is more to this than meets the eye? Chu Yang seems to be very impatient. Zhuge Yunshan paced back and forth. Are the Moon Breeze couple going to leave as well? After they leave, it will be difficult to borrow their strength again? Could it be? The person beside him also suddenly woke up and said, That's right. This place is indeed thought-provoking. After a pause, he said, Clan Lord, eldest young master, and the rest are preparing to find trouble with Chu Yang tomorrow morning after the funeral today. Zhuge Yunshan said furiously, Bastard! As the clan lord, I am already enduring such humiliation. Does this bastard really want to destroy the entire Zhuge clan? He walked back angrily. Tomorrow, the people from the clan's disciplinary hall will wait at the door. Whoever dares to step out of the house will be beheaded immediately. Yes. Zhuge Yunshan walked all the way to the secret location of the clan. He thought to himself, that black-robed man that Chu Yang mentioned, it was really ridiculous. Elder Master had always been dressed in linen clothes. What black-robed man? And the Moon Breeze couple actually requested for people to go and clarify things. Zhuge Yunshan felt extremely depressed. Chu Yang carried Chu Feiyan and walked out of the main gate of the Zhuge clan. Just as he was about to use his martial arts, he saw a group of people in white walking towards him. The one at the front was Diwu Qingru. Seeing Chu Yang carrying someone out of the Zhuge clan alone, even Diwu Qingru was shocked. So it's Brother Chu, Diwu Qingru said lightly. The people behind him all showed hatred in their eyes when they saw Chu Yang. The 5 supreme martial artists of their clan had died in Chu Yang's hands. Although they were the ones who attacked Chu Yang first, and from Chu Yang's point of view, they deserved to die. But they were after all half of the Diwu clan's battle power. Brother Diwu? Chu Yang was startled. He smiled and said, Your clan is here to pay their respects. Yes. Diwu Qingru smiled and said, The 5 people of our clan had their funeral yesterday. So today, we have specially come to send off the elders of the Zhuge clan. There was absolutely no fluctuation in Diwu Qingru's voice. However, he emphasized that there are 5 people from our clan. Especially when he said the word 5. It was slightly dragged out. Behind him, the people of the Diwu clan all thought that Diwu Qingru was settling scores with Chu Yang. There was a sense of mutual hostility. They couldn't help but have a common enemy. Oh, your clan also lost 5 people? Chu Yang smiled lightly and said, "They must have taken part in some conspiracy? Got caught in the crossfire?" Diwu Qingru said lightly, "There is a conspiracy, but we can't help it." Chu Yang said lightly, "Maybe we can't help it, but in a battle swords have no eyes. They can't recognize who is from the Diwu clan, and who is from the Zhuge clan." Diwu Qingru's eyes moved and he said, "According to what Brother Chu said, they deserve to die?" Chu Yang smiled and said, "Their surname is Diwu, first name is Diwu. 5 went 5 died. You people of the Diwu clan might as well carve the word 5 on your faces." Diwu Qingru sneered and said, "No matter where it is carved, it won't live when it's time to die." "That's right." Chu Yang laughed and said, "The Diwu clan is really fated with the word 5. It's a pity that I, Chu Yang, am not fated with the word 5. No matter where you carve it, no matter when. I haven't seen it." Diwu Qingru said lightly, "The people of the Diwu clan all have the pride of the Diwu clan. Usually you can't tell from the outside, you need to look at the inside." Chu Yang smiled lightly and said, "I'm about to leave Tianji City. In the future, I'll see the inside of the Diwu clan." As he said, he clasped his hands and said, "Goodbye." Diwu Qingru clasped his hands and said, "The mountains are high and the rivers are wide, take care." "I don't believe in how high the mountains are. How wide the rivers are." Chu Yang laughed and carried Chu Fan on his back. He flew away. Diwu Qingru looked at Chu Yang's back view, and his face was heavy. His eyes were cold. Only the two of them could really understand the conversation between the two of them just now. The word 5 had opened a rift between the two of them. Diwu Qingru knew that he was scheming this time. He had really angered Chu Yang. Chu Yang might understand his difficulties, but after all, he had gone overboard this time. Chu Yang's last sentence showed his attitude. "I won't trust you anymore. This person is really arrogant." Behind him, an elder looked at the direction where Chu Yang had left and said coldly, "I can't stand him." Diwu Qingru said lightly, "The people of the 8 super clans can't stand him, but the 400 to 500 supreme martial artists of the 8 super clans are already buried. Yet he's still alive and kicking. So what if you can't stand him?" He waved his sleeves and said, "As a person, you must remember that when you don't care about others, others will also not like you. When you want to kill someone, you have to start guarding against that person coming to kill you at any time. Go in. Chu Yang's matter has come to an end for the time being. No one is allowed to mention it again." Chu Yang returned to the Orchard Palace. Thinking of what Diwu Qingru had said to him along the way, he snorted coldly in his heart. "Luckily I was careful. Otherwise, I would have really been tricked by you." As soon as he entered, Chu Lu'er, who had been waiting for him, hurried out to welcome him. Chu Fan was still in a deep sleep. Chu Yang carefully placed Chu Fan on the bed that had been prepared beforehand, and started to treat every wound on his body carefully. Seeing her father being tortured so miserably, Chu Lu'er's tears flowed down her cheeks. "Big brother, what happened to my father?" Although Chu Lu'er was very strong, she was still a little girl after all. She wiped her tears and asked. "It was done by the people of Zhuge clan," Chu Yang said in a heavy voice. "The person who did this is currently imprisoned here." "Me? Zhuge Changchang?" Chu Lu'er's eyes suddenly shone brightly as she asked through gritted teeth. "Yes. The cause is me." Chu Yang didn't hide anything, and explained the reason why Zhuge Changchang did it. "How can I blame you?" Chu Lu'er said hatefully. "It's all Zhuge Changchang's fault. I won't let him off easily." Chu Yang nodded. "Since you say so, I'll leave Zhuge Changchang to you." Chu Lu'er nodded vigorously. Chu Yang stared at Chu Lu'er and said word by word. "Lu'er, you need to remember that in this world, the weak are prey to the strong. It's not rare to be tortured. If we don't become stronger, we'll still encounter such things in the future. We'll still be tortured. After all, we're still too weak. Do you understand?" "I understand, big brother." Chu Lu'er nodded vigorously. "Also, you're learning the art of poison, and it's a unique martial art. So in terms of temperament, you need to train." Chu Yang said seriously. "Don't kill those who shouldn't be killed, but don't be soft-hearted towards those who deserve to die." "Yes, big brother." Chu Lu'er bit her thin red lips and said, "If you're not ruthless, you won't be able to stand firm." Big brother, you want to say this, right? Chu Yang was stunned. He was speechless. When did the little lass learn to say these words? Chu Luer bit her red lips and stared at the white snow on the ground. She said softly, I'll make this Zhuge Changchang regret living in this world. Her voice was very soft. It was as soft as a wisp of smoke, slowly dissipating as soon as she said it. But Chu Yang actually shuddered. The second update. Begging for votes. I'll continue to write the third update. G. To be continued. Chapter 1141. Among the Chu brothers, Dong Wuxiang's injuries had already mostly recovered. The dark saber had also been reconnected by Chu Yang. It was even more powerful than before it was broken. Mo Layer's injuries were also more or less healed. Mo Qinggu had already started to run back and forth. Occasionally, she would hug the ring that Beluqing left behind before he broke through the void and mumble to herself. It was obvious that although the little girl was often mischievous when Master Bu was around, his departure this time was quite a big blow to Mo Qinggu. Rui Batong had fully recovered and even improved. In the past few days, he had swayed his shoulders and walked back and forth in front of Dong Wuxiang. This made Dong Wuxiang gnash his teeth in hatred. He wished he could recover completely right now and give this fellow a good thrashing. In fact, he was afraid that he would beat him to death so that he could advance one more time. But he really couldn't tolerate this. He had to admit that it was really a bird's breath. Meng Chaoran had taken on the role of housekeeper and full-time nanny during this period of time. The Moon Breeze couple walked back and forth in the courtyard with their hands behind their backs. They walked in a circle, facing each other with a distance of 4 to 5 feet. They walked in a circle, which seemed to contain a strange rhythm. After Chu Yang finished treating Chu Fan's injuries, he came out just in time to see them. He couldn't help but ask curiously, Seniors, what are you doing? Yu Lingxue smiled lightly and said, Chu Yang, come and see. This time, it's our new comprehension after our injuries. Chu Yang's interest was immediately piqued. He went forward and asked, New comprehension? Yes, a brand new comprehension. And this kind of comprehension is especially useful for you guys. Yu Lingxue said with a smile. I'd like to hear the details, Chu Yang said with great interest. Yu Lingxue smiled and said, In the past, when we practiced, there was a saying called absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and swallowing the essence of the sun and moon. Is that right? Yes. Wrong. Very wrong. Yu Lingxue said seriously. This time, when we were injured during the cold days, both of us were practicing in the room. We felt a little stuffy, so we walked out. However, because our vital energy was damaged and our body's foundation was injured, we couldn't absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth above us. We could only take a walk in the courtyard and try to recover our physical body. However, during this process, because we couldn't absorb the spiritual energy of heaven, we instead felt a surge of heat from the spring under our feet. And this heat is different from the heavenly spirit qi in the past. Yu Lingxue smiled and said, I tried to use this heat to guide and unblock my meridians, and it was actually quite effective. After thinking long and hard, I finally understood one thing. In the past, our cultivation methods were a little one-sided. Chu Yang pondered and said, What Elder Yu means is, the so-called spiritual energy of heaven and earth that we've absorbed in the past is actually just spiritual energy of heaven. Yu Lingxue smiled in relief. Exactly. In the past, when we practice martial arts, we are used to absorbing the spiritual qi of heaven and earth from the top of our heads and around our bodies. Generally, we don't pay attention to what's below our feet. Even if I did absorb earth qi, it's just a very small amount. So this is the flaw of the cultivation method. For tens of thousands of years, countless seniors had racked their brains to improve their cultivation methods, but they had never been able to achieve perfection. The real reason lies in this. Heaven and earth are out of balance. How can it be perfect? Yu Lingxue said, Chu Yang, the so-called inner demons, the so-called qi deviation, the so-called heavenly punishment, these are the real reasons. Chu Yang seemed to have realized something. Senior, please advise me. Cultivation methods are all thoroughly tempered over tens of thousands of years. There are basically no mistakes. However, the only thing that is not absorbed is earth chi. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth is completely different from earth chi. Listen to me carefully. Earth chi is beneficial to any cultivation method. The details are like this. Yu Lingxue said slowly. Chu Yang's expression was solemn as he memorized it carefully. After a long while, the Moon Breeze couple started to walk in circles again. Their expressions also changed from heavy and serious to relaxed. Chu Yang walked to one side alone. He took off his shoes and stood barefoot on the snowy ground, wanting to try out this feeling. At first, he only felt a bone-chilling coldness coming up from below his feet. Chu Yang didn't expel this cold air. Instead, he circulated it along the path of the layered heavens divine technique. He didn't pay attention to the spiritual energy around him, but focused all his attention on the soles of his feet. Then, as he circulated his energy, after the coldness, he felt an itchy feeling on the soles of his feet. It was as if there was a trace of mellow and gentle aura coming up slowly from the soles of his feet. This aura had a very simple and honest feeling to it. It was as if there was an absolutely dependable person standing right beside him, a kind of peace and security. As this aura was absorbed into his body bit by bit, Chu Yang slowly felt an incomparable sense of security. His heart and soul were at peace. The speed of absorption also became faster. In an instant, he only felt that the ground beneath his feet was slowly expanding outwards, extending outwards. This feeling was extremely wonderful. Chu Yang was different from the Moon Breeze couple. Because even though the Moon Breeze couple had comprehended the trick and use of absorbing earth chi at an extremely weak moment, they couldn't use their own cultivation after all. Thus, the absorption process was also slower. However, Chu Yang was in a perfect state in terms of energy and spirit. As more and more of this mellow aura was absorbed into his body, it slowly formed a warm force. It merged into the layered heavens divine technique in his dantian. Chu Yang sensitively discovered that the layered heavens divine technique was being flipped open at this moment. It was as if a ball of still fog had suddenly rushed into cold air, churning violently. The sword spirit, who was in the middle of cultivating his divine soul, suddenly woke up with a start. He inexplicably looked at the rich earth energy rushing into Chu Yang's body, and let out an incredulous cry. How can he comprehend earth energy now? Even though the conditions are already met, it's still too sudden. Chu Yang fell into a meditative state. After a long while he suddenly felt a sense of danger. He opened his eyes, and saw an old man in sackcloth standing at the entrance. His robe was wide and his face was ancient. He was looking inside with bright eyes. Chu Yang's heart skipped a beat. He asked, "This is?" The Moon Breeze couple was still leisurely circling around, as if they didn't notice the old man's arrival. Or perhaps, they did but didn't care and didn't take it to heart at all. Dong Wuxiang, Rui Butong, Emo Lei Emo Qinggu, Chu Lu and the others each occupied a corner of the courtyard and were cultivating. They also ignored the old man who suddenly came to visit. The old man smiled warmly and said, "My surname is Zhuge. I've been summoned by the Moon Breeze couple, and I've come specially." Chu Yang let out an "oh." Then he heard Yu Lingxue say, "Come in. What are you standing outside for?" Without looking at him, he took out a snow-white silk handkerchief from his bosom, and walked over with a smile to wipe Feng Yuro's forehead. Feng Yuro smiled warmly, and rolled her eyes at him. She said, "I'm not tired. You're making a joke out of yourself." Yu Lingxue laughed and kept the silk handkerchief. He said, "Chu Yang, go get a few stools. We'll have a chat with our old friends in the courtyard." Chu Yang agreed. Then he and Dong Wuxiang brought 3 stools over, and placed them in the courtyard. Yu Lingxue said dispassionately, "Sit." But he himself lifted his feet slowly, and took off his boots. He walked barefoot in the snow, step by step crunching on the snow. He walked to the front of the stools and sat down comfortably. Then he moved his feet and buried them in the snow. He shuddered contentedly and took a deep breath. This feeling is really comfortable. Seeing Zhuge Sangqiong staring at him in confusion, Yu Lingxue smiled and invited him. "Sangqiong, you try it too. This feeling is pretty good." Zhuge Sangqiong smiled bitterly. Feng Yuro said angrily at the side, "You're already so old. Yet you're still like a child. What do you look like barefoot? What's more, you're injured and there's a distinguished guest here. Yu Lingxue chuckled and said, although I'm seriously injured, I can't forget my usual habits. Bathing my feet in the snow is a great joy in life. How can I give it up so easily? Zhuge Zongxiong looked over and indeed saw that Yu Lingxue's face was a little pale with an abnormal color of blood. Feng Yuro looked a little better than Yu Lingxue, but she was also a little pale. He thought to himself, that's right. The few of you have killed so many supreme martial artists. No one would believe that you didn't suffer from serious internal injuries. Yu Lingxue's injuries were more serious, because he tried his best to protect Feng Yuro. This should be the reason why Feng Yuro's injuries were lighter. Yu Lingxue leaned against the back of the chair, his feet buried in the snow. He said to Zhuge Zongxiong calmly, Zongxiong, as you can see, Roer and I are seriously injured, and can no longer use our cultivation. We can't go to your place, so we can only call you over to ask you something. Zhuge Zongxiong nodded and said with a smile, that's what I should do. I should be the one paying a visit to the two of you. How would I dare to trouble the two of you to go over personally? But he thought to himself, the two of you can't use your cultivation? If I believe this, how many pieces will I turn into scattered pieces here in the next moment? Yu Lingxue smiled and nodded. His expression gradually turned heavy. He said, I'll only ask you one thing. Zhuge Zongxiong said, please speak, elder. Previously, we went to Mount Xingyun to fight. Let's not talk about this matter for now. Yu Lingxue looked sharply at Zhuge Zongxiong and said, however, the juniors here were also attacked. My disciple was attacked and killed. Yu Lingxue's eyes turned into two sharp swords, looking at Zhuge Zongxiong's face. He said word by word, the one who attacked was a black-robed man. Moreover, he was an upper-grade supreme martial artist. What do you think of this? That person is detestable, Zhuge Zongxiong said without hesitation. An upper-grade supreme martial artist personally dealing with these juniors? He has no sense of shame at all. Yu Lingxue looked at him indifferently and said playfully, so it wasn't you who did it? As he spoke, Feng Yuro's eyes also quietly focused on Zhuge Zongxiong's face. The couple just stared at Zhuge Zongxiong quietly like this. The atmosphere quietened down at once. Chapter 1143. He only wants to kill me, not the innocent. Chu Yang said indifferently. Who is innocent? Moreover, he clearly showed mercy when he attacked Qinggu and Qianqian. In the end, if Qianqian hadn't pounced on me at the critical moment, she wouldn't have been seriously injured at all. Super strong hands cover the sky. Qinggu has Ningbu behind her, Lu has Z behind her, and Qianqian has all of you behind her. He knows everything about us. Chu Yang said slowly, if it were people from other clans, or people who don't belong to big clans, they would want to kill the three of them the most right now. Because after killing them, the first unlucky one would be the Zhuge clan. Because this is Tianji City, the territory and headquarters of the Zhuge clan. After he said this, everyone fell silent, because the meaning of Chu Yang's words was already very obvious. Let me say a few words. Chu Le came out from the corner, with an inexplicable coldness on her face. She said, I can't be sure that it's this person, but when he appeared just now, I felt very uncomfortable. Yu Lingxue and Feng Yuro nodded slowly and said, since that's the case from now on, let's not mention this matter anymore. He closed his eyes. When we recover, we will naturally have a plan. Chu Yang noticed that the direction Chu Luer came out from was the direction where Zhuge Changchang was imprisoned. Over there, Dong Wushang and Rui Butong had already fought to their heart's content. One had to admit that Rui Butong was indeed suppressing Dong Wushang this time. With the strength of a first-grade supreme martial artist, it was very easy to deal with a 7th-grade martial saint, even if it was a saber saint. However, Rui Butong had never felt relaxed before. It was only in this battle that he truly experienced Dong Wushang's ferocious and domineering nature. With the strength of a first-grade supreme martial artist, he was actually restrained by Dong Wushang, because he didn't dare to use all his strength, but also couldn't not use all his strength to deal with it. Using all his strength to attack and deal with the super biological empire. Obviously, these were two different things. He was forced by Dong Wuxiang to jump up and down like a big monkey. Within moments, he was drenched in sweat and repeatedly begging for mercy. Fourth brother. Fourth brother. Fourth brother, I was wrong. I was really wrong. Please spare me. Dong Wuxiang was also shocked because he had already used all his strength. Who would have thought that Rui Butong would actually be able to withstand it? If it was a real battle, he would have lost long ago. And he was dead. Dong Wuxiang had been able to defeat 1 or 2 martial monarchs when he had been a 7th-grade saber emperor. When he was a 7th-grade saber sovereign, he could defeat a 1st-grade martial saint as long as he went all out. Now he was a 7th-grade saber sage. In a situation where Rui Butong, a 1st-grade supreme martial artist, couldn't attack with all his might, he was actually having such a hard time. He watched as the two of them stopped. Rui Butong shrieked as if he had seen a ghost and fled in a sorry state. Dong Wuxiang's expression was grave. Yu Lingxue seemed to know what Dong Wuxiang was thinking. Supremes were different. You will only be able to understand this difference once you become a supreme being. Dong Wuxiang pondered for a while before he replied solemnly, yes. At this moment, a scream that seemed to have been suppressed for a long time suddenly rang out. It was a miserable scream. It was so painful that it made one's hair stand on end. Zhuge Changchang. After this scream, it actually stopped abruptly. Immediately, there was a kind of oppressive feeling. It was as if the scream had been suppressed for a long time by the pain. But just as it was released, it was suppressed by the pain so much that it couldn't make a sound. Chu Yang's heart trembled. He went over at the same time as Dong Wuxiang and the others. At a glance, the two of them actually trembled all over. Zhuge Changchang's flesh and blood were almost all torn apart. All the tendons in his body had already bulged out of his body. They were knotted together. They were bulging and bursting apart. In his flesh and blood, they were almost transparent. His whole body had inadvertently curled up into a ball. Inadvertently, it was stretched even longer. Inadvertently, it was stretched into a grotesque shape. The romantic politics of rebirth. This kind of pain could no longer be described as being cut into pieces. The most miserable thing was that there was actually something else. On his body, his tendons and blood vessels were constantly bulging out. Once they bulged out, his flesh and blood would burst open. His flesh and blood would split open and blood would flow out. And that split open flesh and blood would instantly turn into a strange gray color. After turning gray, some small squirming worms would immediately grow on it. They would try their best to burrow into Zhuge Changchang's body. After burrowing in, they would stir in his flesh and devour his flesh and blood. And on the outside, they would immediately be covered with a layer of white maggots. Wriggling and squirming, Zhuge Changchang opened his mouth wide. But he couldn't make a sound. He wasn't restrained in any way, but he couldn't make a single sound. He was completely controlled by the pain. The most horrifying thing was that his body was being destroyed over and over again. He was being tortured over and over again. But he was also being regenerated over and over again. The broken flesh and blood were being drilled into by those tiny worms. And then maggots came out. Then, they were actually being healed. And then they were being torn open again. It was obvious that they didn't want him to die. They wanted him to live and bear this kind of punishment. Luer, Chu Yang shouted. What's the matter with you? Chu Luer answered and came over. She was actually very confused. What's the matter? Looking inside, she suddenly screamed and covered her eyes with both hands. She said in a panic, how did this happen? Dong Wuxiang and the others looked at Chu Lu, as if they had seen a ghost. This state that was 100 times worse than hell was actually caused by Chu Luer? What kind of poison did you use? Chu Yang asked the online game priest Xiao. I hated him for hurting my father, so I poisoned him with a few kinds of poison. After that I left. I didn't expect this to happen. Chu Luer's heart thumped wildly. She never expected that the few kinds of poisons she used would actually reach such a state. There was spirit-breaking powder, life and death pill, tendon-splitting powder, 10,000 years corpse poison, decay poison and goo poison, myriad incarnation goo, and finally, innate poison. Chu Luer murmured. I used all those poisons that are said to be able to make one wish for death together. Everyone was dumbfounded and felt a chill run down their spines. It was really her. Such a pure, cute, and shy little girl, who looked like a pure white flower, had personally created a hell on earth. Even Yuling Xue and Feng Yuro, who had just walked over, shuddered. When they looked at Chu Luer again, it was as if they were looking at a monster or a demon. These poisons, where did you get them from? Chu Yang asked with a crooked mouth and eyes. I don't need to get them from anywhere. Chu Luer said innocently. I only need to circulate my poison techniques, and I can use any kind of poison I want. You know this. Oh my God. Chu Yang held his head with both hands. What kind of person have I personally taught? Oh my God. Let me kill him. Dong Wuxiang casually broke a tree branch and stabbed it into Zhuge Changchang's heart. Under such a heavy blow, Zhuge Changchang's heart instantly shattered into pieces. However, the pain in his body still continued. It's useless. Yuling Xue was full of wariness. A portion of these poisons were imagined by Wu Jueqing back then. Wu Jueqing didn't have an innate poison body. So although he knew that these poisons could produce the latest chapter of Shen Nong's monstrous life, he couldn't do anything about it. However, he was powerless to do anything about it. These poisons were useless even if he died. Because, with that life and death pill, spirit-shattering powder, corpse poison, rotting poison and myriad incarnation goo, even if a person dies, his soul will also be trapped in his body. He will continue to be tortured. Cold sweat broke out on Dong Wuxiang's head. There's actually such a thing. How tyrannical was this poison? The only thing that could be endured was death. However, under this poison, even death couldn't be avoided. Burn him completely. Even his bones will be burned to ashes, and he will be relieved of his pain. However, he will also disappear completely. Otherwise, even if only a large piece of his soul is left, he will continue to lie on top of it and suffer the pain of his soul shattering. Everyone stared blankly, dumbfounded. The culprit, Miss Chu Luer, even shrank into Chu Yang's arms like a quail. She covered her eyes with her hands, not even daring to look. Let me see, let me see. An excited voice rang out. It was Wu Jueqing. At this moment, he was being carried forward by Meng Chaoran, his face full of cold sweat. His spine and pelvis, which had only now begun to heal slowly, were now moving. Now that he moved, the pain doubled. The broken bones of his spine and pelvis, that had just started to heal, started to intertwine again. This kind of pain was no different from an extreme punishment. However, he actually didn't care about the doubled pain, and urged Meng Chaoran to carry him over. His face was full of cold sweat, and his whole body was in so much pain that sweat kept breaking out. However, he still had an excited look on his face. Meng Chaoran carried him forward and looked inside. This poison doctor from back then suddenly opened his mouth wide, and his eyes wide. He was making noises, as if he was a mortal who had seen a deity. Oh my God! This poison doctor from back then opened his mouth wide and exclaimed, which deity made this great achievement? The Empire has once again started an all-out war. Such immortal creation, such uncanny workmanship. This old man is really in awe. I'm sincerely convinced. Everyone shuddered again. They turned around and looked at this one of the tribulations back then, the poison master of the heavens now, with a strange look in their eyes. This is too great. Wu Jueqing was still in so much pain that he was sweating profusely. However, his body was actually twisting excitedly. Everyone's faces twitched. Big brother, don't you know that twisting like this will make all your previous efforts go to waste? Thinking about how Wu Jueqing was feeling now, everyone was sweating profusely. A person whose spine and pelvis were completely shattered was actually dancing and twisting his buttocks? What kind of feeling was this? Chapter 1144. Everyone was dumbstruck. Rui Budong finally couldn't stand the series of oh my gods anymore. He carried in a huge bundle of firewood and threw it on the ground. Then, he went to the room and took out 2 barrels of oil. Using a long wooden stick, he lifted Zhuge Changchang's body into the barrel and placed him at the top. Then he started a fire. The flames burned fiercely, bringing with them a strange pungent smell. Zhuge Changchang's body was actually still spasming and twisting in the fire. Even his legs were burned off and the bones on his upper body were still twisting and turning. Chu Lu hid in Chu Yang's arms, trembling all over. Mo Qinggu hid on the other side. The two little girls were like doves that had lost all their feathers in the snow, shivering. Everyone was speechless. They really didn't know what to say. The culprit had used it without even knowing. Now, everyone was actually not as frightened as the culprit. While the fire was crackling and burning, Wu Jueqing was prattling on and on. Who used the poison? Why did it burn? Bastard. Who told you to burn it? Who used the poison? Who? Everyone looked at Chu Luer speechlessly. Wu Jueqing followed everyone's gaze and saw a little girl with a pale face and tears in her eyes. He couldn't help but be shocked. He said in disbelief, "Could it be?" Cough, cough, cough. Chu Yang coughed dryly a few times and said, "It's like this. By chance, I obtained a book called Guide to the World's Poisons. Then, I saw that my little sister seemed to be extremely interested in using poisons. So I threw the book to her and let her practice on her own. Later, Lord Z came and also promoted my little sister's cultivation a little. Cough, cough. It seems to be like this." Wu Jueqing's breathing quickened. He looked at Chu Luer with bulging eyes, making some noise in his throat. Guide to the World of Poisons? Practice it for fun. Ha ha ha. Unable to control himself, this poison doctor rolled his eyes again and again. He wanted to say something, but he suddenly bit his tongue. Then, when he wanted to open his mouth to speak again, his face suddenly turned red, and in the next moment he fainted. Lord Wu couldn't help but feel faint. He had spent his entire life studying the Heaven and Earth Poison Compendium, but he was still unable to use the most crucial poisons, even though he was proficient in using them. It was one thing to think about it, but whether or not it could be used was the key. Now this little girl had only followed a book to self-study, and she had actually managed to come up with it? Even if Lord Wu hadn't been injured, he would have fainted in such a situation, let alone now that he was heavily injured. Meng Qiaoren hurriedly carried him back. Chu Yang followed them in and inspected him. He couldn't help but click his tongue. The poison doctor's bones, which had just begun to heal, were completely torn apart again. Chu Yang sighed. Although he understood Wu Jueqing's feelings, he still didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After treating Wu Jueqing's injuries, Chu Yang was just about to go out when he saw Wu Jueqing open his eyes. At this moment, all the grief and indignation in Wu Jueqing's eyes suddenly disappeared. Then he looked at Chu Yang and said quietly, "Wait for me." Then he closed his eyes. Chu Yang was here. He sat down beside the table. Then he witnessed an astonishing scene. A white cloud emerged from Wu Jueqing's body and started to circle around Wu Jueqing's body. With every circle, the white cloud shrank by the size of a fist. When it reached his thigh, the white cloud disappeared without a trace. Immediately after, a fresh wind blew, just like the morning breeze in spring. Fresh and natural, refreshing and refreshing. The morning breeze blew, but it didn't blow anything. It only blew on Wu Jueqing himself. And Wu Jueqing's body, like a piece of dead wood that had already decayed a little, suddenly started to recover at a speed visible to the naked eye. The originally dead muscles and skin started to recover just like that, regaining vitality. And his face also slowly became rosy. When the morning wind stopped, Chu Yang could clearly hear creaking sounds. It seemed to be coming from within Wu Jueqing's body, as if the bones were automatically returning to their original positions and healing. Wu Jueqing finally stopped. He opened his eyes and looked at Chu Yang. With a slight smile, he actually sat up from the bed. The next moment he moved his arms and neck, moved his waist and legs, and tried to stand up from the bed. Then, he actually tried to walk a few steps. The more he walked, the smoother it became. Chu Yang's eyes widened. Watching this miracle happen in front of him, he only felt that his brain was already in a knot, and he couldn't speak. At the current stage of Wu Jueqing's injuries, other than the complete version of the heavy pill, there was no other medicine in the world that could heal him. But now, a miracle appeared before his eyes. Wu Jueqing didn't even rely on any medicine, just a morning breeze and a cloud, and he recovered. What was going on? Do you think it's very magical? Wu Jueqing looked at Chu Yang and asked with a smile. Yes, it's very magical. Chu Yang nodded. It's not magical. Wu Jueqing's eyes were filled with longing, affection and emotion. He said, my ancestors are Chen Feng and Lu Yin. Back then, when I was deceived into becoming a tribulation, my ancestors had already left the heavens continent. The reason why I was able to survive until the last moment was that my ancestors had divined that I would face a great tribulation in this life, and each of them gave me 3 streams of vital energy. Chen Feng and Lu Yin's vital energy. Chu Yang asked in shock. Yes, I have my ancestors' vital energy in me. Therefore, although my physical body was destroyed back then, I was able to escape from the heaven-mending cave at the last moment with the vital energy. And over a relatively long period of time, I gradually recovered my physical body. Wu Jueqing smiled lightly. That time, I used 2 gusts of morning breeze and 2 drifting clouds. If this vital energy only existed in my body and wasn't used, my ancestors wouldn't suffer any losses. But once I used it, my ancestors would be weakened and hurt to a certain extent. Therefore, unless I had no other choice, I didn't dare to use it, nor could I bear to use it. Today, this is the 3rd cloud and the 3rd morning breeze. Wu Jueqing stared at Chu Yang. Do you understand what I mean? I understand. Chu Yang nodded. Due to my severe injuries this time, the ancestors' life force can only help me heal my injuries. As for my cultivation, perhaps it can only help me recover half of it. Wu Jueqing sensed himself for a moment and said solemnly, but I can't not use it, especially after discovering this little girl. He chuckled. Completely self-taught, she actually knew the guide to poisons of the world, and she could actually condense that kind of poison on her own. How could I let go of such a talent? He said solemnly, this poison is the biggest regret in my life. It's more important to me than my life. Chu Yang asked tentatively, Elder, what do you mean? Wu Jueqing's eyes flashed. He said, let that girl in. Let me take a look. Chu Yang nodded. Okay. He got up and walked to the door. Lure, come in for a while. Chu Lure agreed and ran over quickly. After entering, she saw that Wu Jueqing had actually stood up. The little girl was also shocked. Her mouth opened wide and she exclaimed, why are you standing up? Why I'm standing up is not important. What's important is you. Wu Jueqing smiled. Girl, come here. Let me take a look at you. Chu Lure looked at Chu Yang doubtfully. Chu Yang nodded encouragingly. Chu Lure walked over meekly. Girl, let me ask you, did you cultivate this guide to poisons of the world by yourself? Wu Jueqing asked kindly. Yes. Chu Lure nodded. Sometimes Big Brother also helps me explain and ponder over it. But these few days I've been reading, memorizing and experimenting on my own. He helped you explain? Wu Jueqing rolled his eyes and glanced at Chu Yang. He said disdainfully, what's the use of him helping you explain? He's someone who doesn't know anything. Chu Yang smiled bitterly. Big Brother is the person I respect the most. Chu Lure's face darkened. Looking at this world-renowned poison doctor, she actually warned him. Cough, cough, cough. Wu Jueqing choked and coughed violently. He stared at the little girl dumbfounded. The little girl's expression was resolute. Anyone who dares to insult my big brother has to apologize. Apologize? Wu Jueqing was confused. Do immortals have to apologize if they insult him? Chu Lure pursed her lips and said, so what if they're immortals? Even if they're higher than immortals, they have to apologize if they insult my big brother. Chu Lure said dispassionately, my poison can kill people now. In the future, it may not be impossible for it to kill immortals. Even in the world after the void-shattering realm, as long as there's a suitable poison, can't it spread over millions of miles? Wu Jueqing was shocked. He stared at Chu Lure dumbfounded. Even in the world after the void-shattering realm, as long as there's a suitable poison, can't it spread over millions of miles? The shock that this sentence had on this poison doctor was unparalleled. He had never thought that his poison would be able to kill an immortal, not to mention using poison to massacre the world above the heavens. But this little girl's thoughts were actually so crazy. Just because someone insulted her big brother, She actually wanted to spread her poison over millions of miles? What the heck? I like this kind of character. The next moment, Wu Jueqing suddenly beamed with delight. He actually bent down toward Chu Yang. I'm sorry, Brother Chu. I shouldn't have insulted you. I apologize. Please forgive me. Chu Yang was shocked, looking at Wu Jueqing, who was bent over in front of him with his forehead almost touching the ground. His eyes widened. His eyebrows flew up to his forehead. He blurted out, "Fuck." Wu Jueqing rolled his eyes. He didn't expect that his first sincere apology in his life would only get such a word in return. Chapter 1145. Why do you want to see my physique? Chulur asked. Why do you want to see my physique? Looking at Wu Jueqing in front of her, Chulur took 2 steps back instead, her face full of vigilance. Why does everyone want to see my physique now? Wu Jueqing was taken aback. I'm just looking, nothing else. Your big brother is right beside you, how can I harm you? Chulur snorted and said, That's hard to say. As she spoke, she looked at Chu Yang for help. Big brother. Chu Yang knew that this was probably a great opportunity for Chu Lu. This person in front of him was the author of the Guide to the World of Poison. This person's poison skills were absolutely at the acme of perfection. He said, Luer, Elder Wu is a senior expert. Besides, aren't there still many things you don't understand from the Guide to the World of Poison? This Elder Wu before you is the author of that book. Chu Luer tilted her head and said, All right, I'll let you see then. Her voice seemed to be giving Wu Jueqing a great gift. Wu Jueqing said excitedly, Good, good. Then he reached out and placed his hand on Chu Luer's wrist. Then he was taken aback. He blurted out, Innate spiritual body? His expression became serious. Then, as if he had sensed something, he was suddenly shocked again. Not only innate spiritual body, but also martial saint level cultivation? At such a young age. Then he shuddered violently. His finger flicked away from Chu Luer's wrist and he exclaimed, Oh my God. Innate poison meridians, innate poison body, innate. Oh my God. Cough, cough, cough. Chu Yang wanted to laugh but was too embarrassed to do so. He could only hold it in and cough a few times. He had to remind this old man. You are the descendant of Chen Feng, one of the tribulations from tens of thousands of years ago. An expert who has surpassed supreme martial artists. Can you not be so alarmed? Take note of your status and poise. You must have poise. But Wu Jueqing had obviously already tossed poise and status out of the window. She stared at Chu Luer with trembling hands as she exclaimed, Oh my God. Oh my God. So that's how it is. I see. So there is actually such a person and such a body in this world. Oh my God. Chu Luer widened her eyes and returned to Chu Yang's side in fear. She leaned on him and whispered, Big brother, is this old man crazy? Cough, Luer, your aptitude is too good. That's why he's shocked. Chu Yang coughed dryly and explained in a low voice, Luer, you should really be proud. To be able to shock the poison doctor Wu Jueqing to this extent. I reckon you're the only one in history who can do that. Oh. Chu Luer replied and said, So my physique is still considered good. I've been tortured since I was born. And I've been tortured for more than 10 years. I've been running back and forth in hell every day. I can actually shock people to this extent. Chu Yang coughed and said, Yes. If you don't experience setbacks, how can you see the rainbow? To you, the pain is already a thing of the past. It has become a capital that will never be erased. And in front of you is a rainbow path that leads straight to the clouds. Hee. Chu Luer pursed her lips and laughed. Chu Yang, I have something to tell you. On the other side, Wu Jueqing shouted. What is it? Chu Yang actually knew what was going on, but he still pretended to be confused. Let your younger sister acknowledge me as her master. Wu Jueqing's eyes were shining. He grabbed Chu Yang's hand with one hand and gripped Chu Yang's shoulder with the other. Let this girl acknowledge me as her master. He used so much force that Chu Yang's shoulder actually made cracking sounds. What the heck? Let go of your hand first. My shoulder is going to break. Chu Yang was in so much pain that even his nose and eyes were wrinkled together. Oh. Wu Jueqing hurriedly let go of his hand, his expression somewhat embarrassed. Chu Yang rubbed his shoulder and said exasperatedly, If you want to take in a disciple, you have to ask for the opinion of the person in question, right? What's with crushing my shoulder? Wu Jueqing snorted and said, Who can't tell that this little girl listens to everything you say? If you say yes, she won't say no. If you say no, even if I'm a deity, she won't acknowledge me as her master. This poison doctor was really smart. He actually saw the crux of the matter so quickly. Chu Yang had no choice but to ask Chu Luer. Luer, what do you think? Chu Luer's expression was complicated. She said, I'll listen to Big Brother. Chu Yang thought for a while, still unable to make up his mind. To Chu Luer, Wu Jueqing could be said to be the most suitable master in the world. Even someone from the heavenly imperial court might not be more suitable than Wu Jueqing. But Chu Yang was still worried about Chu Luer's safety. His identity as the master of the tribulation sword had to be announced to the world eventually. When the time came, if Luer was by Wu Jueqing's side, would he hurt Chu Luer? What else are you troubled about? Wu Jueqing was a little anxious. He made threatening gestures and said, What's there to consider about such a good thing? Hurry up and let this little girl acknowledge me as her master. I'm the only one who truly knows her value. I'm also the only one who truly knows where she's heading in the future. Others can only see her free and natural physique. Innate free and natural physique is nothing. It was rare to see a disciple so suitable for him. Having a successor for his lifelong legacy was a great joy in his life. But this little girl was dawdling. Her mind was elsewhere. This was really the first time Wu Jueqing had encountered such a situation. With his status, if he shouted that he wanted to take in a disciple, even if he had to make people kneel and kowtow 108,000 miles away, the queue would be from the southeast all the way to the northwest. Why was it so worthless in the eyes of these two siblings? I can accept her as my disciple, but I have a request, said Chu Yang. Request? Say it. Wu Jueqing was practically exasperated. I want to accept a disciple, and I actually have to agree to his request. What the heck? Is it so difficult to be a master nowadays? That's right, no matter when, no matter what happens, you cannot hurt Luer, said Chu Yang solemnly. Shut your fucking mouth. How can I hurt my disciple? Wu Jueqing blew his top and glared at him. What a bastard. This kind of worry is simply unreasonable. Chu Yang said calmly. I don't know if I'm a bastard or not, but I only want this one condition. No matter when, no matter what, you cannot hurt her. I agree. Wu Jueqing was so angry that he laughed instead. He said, She's my successor. Even if this girl were to poison me to death in the future, I would still close my eyes with a smile and say joyfully, The student has surpassed the master. Will that do? Chu Yang smiled. Thank you for your understanding, elder. When the time comes, please don't forget to say the student has surpassed the master. Wu Jueqing was exasperated. He said furiously, You really want me to be poisoned to death by my disciple? Chu Yang burst into laughter. He gave Chu Luer a look and said, Luer, aren't you going to greet your master? Chu Luer responded with an O in confusion, and looked at Wu Jueqing. However, she saw Wu Jueqing's hands shaking like rattledrums. His face flushed red with agitation. He said, Acknowledging a master and accepting a disciple is a major event in one's life. How can it be done so hastily? We have to find a few witnesses, and make it a little more grand. Chu Yang and Chu Luer were stunned. This master actually wanted to make it a little more grand under such circumstances. However, Wu Jueqing muttered to himself, Now, let Moon Breeze be the witnesses first. It's not enough. With everyone as witnesses, it's barely enough. Let's establish the master-disciple relationship first. When I recover from my injuries, we'll hold a disciple acceptance ceremony and receive some congratulatory gifts. Damn it. If any big clan doesn't come to congratulate me or send gifts, I'll go and destroy them. Law enforcement officers have to come too. If any law enforcement officers don't send gifts, I'll destroy them too. Chu Yang was speechless. Nonsense. It's a major event in the heavens for me to accept a disciple. If no one comes to congratulate me, my disciple won't have any face either. Wu Jueqing glared. Chu Yang raised his hands in surrender. You're right. You're awesome. I'm convinced. The speechlessness in his heart was really indescribable. Moon Breeze was one of the top 5 in the heavens that one couldn't afford to offend. To be the witnesses for him accepting a disciple was actually a little not enough. He was just accepting a disciple, and he actually had to hold a ceremony, ordering the whole world to send gifts. Must he cause a sensation in the heavens? It looked like this descendant of Chunfeng was really a little strange. He was really domineering too. But from this, it could also be seen that Wu Jueqing really valued Chu Lu'er to the extreme. Wu Jueqing called out, "You Lingxue, Feng Yuro, Meng Chaoran and a few other juniors, come in, come in. I have something important to announce." After a short pause, Moon Breeze, Meng Chaoran, Dong Wushang, Rui Butong, Mo Lair, Mo Qinggu and the others gathered together. Wu Jueqing instructed Dong Wushang and Rui Butong, "Go get a few chairs for everyone to sit down. Also find some incense and candles. In any case, the more the better." The two of them went out in confusion. In no time, they came back with all the items. Everyone sat down and looked at Wu Jueqing, all of them confused. Wu Jueqing said, "Chu Yang, you'll be the MC." Chu Yang almost spat out. Did he have to sit on the bench with his bear like this? Helpless, he could only force him to do something beyond his ability. Seeing that everyone had taken their seats, Chu Yang coughed, and was about to prepare for his MC job when he heard Wu Jueqing say, "Don't laugh. Sit up straight. How can you be like this at such a serious moment?" Chu Yang almost choked to death. He turned to look and saw Wu Jueqing sitting right below, upright and still, his countenance solemn, and his expression serious. Chu Yang cleared his throat again and said, "I've gathered everyone here today because of an important matter." Wu Jueqing cut him off. "It's a very important matter." Chu Yang rolled his eyes and said, "I've invited everyone here to be witnesses." Wu Jueqing cut him off. "This is your honor. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.